Hello, everyone, and welcome to the JoyCircuit podcast. Today, we'll be ranking the Final Fantasy games. We will only be ranking the main series Final Fantasy games, so no tactics, no spin-offs, and we won't be touching the two online Final Fantasy 11 and 14. So we kind of all ranked the Final Fantasy games individually through different, metrics ourselves. A lot of it was based on nostalgia, memories from when we originally played it. I guess there's some objective components, Joe specifically, I think, because he didn't beat some of the games.
Yeah.
He may have. Joe, you can go into more detail about how you ranked yours if you want, but...
Yeah, so I tried to be objective, but I probably utterly and completely failed. But I tried, so we'll see what it comes out to be.
Yeah, and I sort of went at it from the nostalgic lens as well.
Yeah.
But I did try and think about a big factor for me was how well do I think it's still does it still hold up by today's standards? So that was a little bit of factor into my thinking as well.
See, I kind of viewed it more so like at the time when I was playing it. It's very nostalgic based, very memory based, which can be an issue when you're just trying to recall something that you beat 15 years ago. But regardless, we each ranked a list and then we compiled that data to create an overall list to rank the Final Fantasy series. So we'll start off by going through the titles one by one. The first game in the series, obviously, is Final Fantasy, released in 1987 in Japan and 1990 in North America. Jeremy, do you want to start off with any of your...
Yeah, so I didn't play this game until the PSP remake. I believe Alex was similar.
Yeah.
For listeners' knowledge, we haven't played the original version. I would like to at some point. I think possibly it would affect my ranking if I played the original. I think I would probably appreciate it a little bit more because I always sort of like to get that, the artist's intent. Like what was that game when it first came out? Final Fantasy 1 for me is cool for history reasons, but other than that, I'm not a big fan of this game. I'm not. The opening music is cool. Obviously, the jobs that you can choose from. I think there's 6 jobs. Is cool. I really like that midway through the game, you get an upgrade on your class, so the fighter becomes a knight or whatever, and the black mage becomes a black wizard. Really like that.
Mm-hmm.
The story to me is, like most NES games, it's very bare bones, but they were trying. So yes, like I said, like this game for history, but overall for me, it's pretty low on my list. I ranked it as actually 12th place out of 13 games that we're ranking, so 12th.
Okay. So to start off, I guess I'll say for 1 to 6, I played them all on mobile. So I was really late to the game with the first 6 games. So in my ranking of them, I try to be objective, but I think like for me personally, a mobile experience just isn't as absorbing.
Yeah, definitely not.
As playing it on a console sitting on the couch. And I definitely wasn't playing it like as a kid with no other responsibilities in the world, just having a good time on a Saturday morning. But I tried to be as objective as possible and really see, the qualities of the games. And if anything, I'd say for the first 6, I may give them a little bit too much credit just because I am being objective. They couldn't really make me angry because, I didn't have high expectations going into them. So for 1, obviously this game, a lot of people say this game kind of saved Square, that they weren't in good shape. And then this kind of first saved them, but also gave them an IP that they could build off and become the company that they are today. So it's obviously an extremely important game.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking back, I liked the music. The music was pretty sweet, especially for an NES game. Other than that, it definitely ages pretty poorly. The super generic RPG. I don't think you could get more generic with the characters. Jeremy, I think you've probably made a million times less generic RPGs on RPG Maker than Final Fantasy 1.
Incomplete games.
Incomplete, but I mean, it had more going for it than Final Fantasy 1.
I mean, there's incomplete Final Fantasies on this list, so we're
definitely
that.
So I mean, I don't think we have to really justify the low ranking so much for 1, but that's not to understate just how important of a game it really was. So no real, I'm not knocking Final Fantasy 1. It's just progress is progress, and this one came first, so it obviously got left behind.
Sure.
Where did you rank it, Joe?
A 12th as well, yeah.
Okay.
It's not the worst. There's worse out there. Tell you that.
So I ranked it at 11th. As Jeremy said, by the way, there's only 13 total games, wiping out the 2 offline, just to keep that in mind when we're kind of listing off where we rank them. But I agree in a lot of ways that it was the first of the series. It came out in 1987, so we can't really expect a whole lot from it. But I like a lot of what the game was. It is a very simple JRPG, but even nowadays to go back and play it, I still think there's a lot there. Like the story is bare bones, but it's spoilers. The whole time loop with Garland going back and becoming chaos and sending the fiends into the future. Like it's an interesting story. Again, nothing special. The majority of the game, you don't really realize that's the case. It's just going around and to the crystals and normal Final Fantasy stuff. But I thought it was pretty cool. You kind of list off the job classes, but I think that, you can't really understate how big an impact that had on the series going forward. A lot of these elements that it created that, are still in Final Fantasy games today. So, but yeah, so that's Final Fantasy 1. So Final Fantasy 2 came out in Japan in 1988 and in North America in 2003 through, I believe, Final Fantasy Origins.
Yeah.
Because, it never came here on the NES.
Yeah. So, I think if I'm correct, there was a almost complete translation / North American port of this game that for whatever reason didn't get released. So we had to wait in 2003. This was a PlayStation 1 game that we first got in North America. And 2003, that was deep into the PS2 life cycle already. So really this game, would have got left behind either way. But other than that, I can kind of see why they didn't release it. It's not a very good game.
It's not.
They were ambitious. They tried a few things that didn't work. And I think a lot of NES games did this. Legend of Zelda 1 through 2. 2 was drastically different than the first game.
Yeah.
There's lots of examples that I could list. But one thing I will say for it, the story was half decent.
Sure.
For the hardware that it was on. They tried to tell a story. More character-based, story rather than sort of nameless creative characters. But the leveling up system I didn't think you don't really level up. You just sort of, you gain attributes based on if you attack enough, you get more attack.
You get hit.
But ultimately what this means is you basically just, you grind these, but you still end up grinding and you're attacking all the time to increase the stat. It's cool in concept, but it was not implemented well. And other RPGs have implemented a similar style much better. And FF2 just misses the mark. It doesn't really build on Final Fantasy in the right ways. And that's why I ranked it last, 13th place for me.
All right. So I think this is where I think I disagree with both of you in the ranking a little bit, in that I ranked this 11th. So I ranked this as better than 1. I do think it moved the series forward. Few things that it added that became iconic to the series was it added chocobos. So now you cannot separate Final Fantasy from chocobos.
True.
I would revolt if there was a new Final Fantasy that didn't have them. It introduced the recurring character of Sid. Also, I think just the fact that it actually had characters who were characters and it had a better story, I think those pushed Final Fantasy forward in the ways that are more important to me. I agree that, the combat, I think, took a step back. Like the progression system took a step back. And overall, the game is still pretty generic, pretty aged relative to more recent entries and games that followed it. So it's still, to me, the third last on the list. But I definitely think it was important. I think it pushed the series forward in good ways. So to me, it's better than Final Fantasy 1.
So I also ranked it last. I think me and Jeremy share a lot of the same feelings on this game. I agree with everything Joe said about the storyline, how it pushed things forward. And as Jeremy said, it was more character focused. They really tried to tell a great story with this game. my reason for ranking it last isn't so much that at the time it wasn't a better game and that it didn't do a lot for the series going forward. It was more so being, I don't know, 20 years old and going back and playing it on the PSP version. It was less enjoyable to play than Final Fantasy 1. Where Final Fantasy 1 had this class system that was kind of cool. It was very bare bones. It was an easy RPG. This one felt frustrating at times, the way the leveling system worked. I just didn't enjoy playing it.
No.
Which is
it was a slog.
Yeah.
And I guess we should specify me and you also played the PSP versions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really not an objective way to review a game, but just that was my experience where I just did not enjoy it nearly as much as I did Final Fantasy 1, just playing day to day. But yeah, so for me, that was also 13th ranked last, unfortunately.
That's fair, though.
So the next game would be Final Fantasy 3, which released in Japan in 1990, but didn't release in North America till 2006 with the DS remake.
Yeah, so the first chance we got to play it was on DS. This really helped the game for me. The fact that it was a full 3D remake meant they could change some things and make it better. So I can't really comment to the original NES game. We've never been able to play like a legal version of that game.
No.
From what I hear, it's really great. And I would say it's probably the best of the NES trilogy from the original NES games, which I obviously haven't played those versions. But I really like this game. The characters are kind of generic. It's a similar sort of story. The wind crystal basically grants you power, and then you have to go through the world and sort of restore balance, essentially. A pretty, tried and true Final Fantasy story. But really the job system is the thing that sticks out. And this is the thing that everyone loves about this game. And it really introduced a robust system that allowed you to customize your characters like on a much grander scale than Final Fantasy 1 ever did. And I just love that customization. And, having played the remake, the battle system was fun. The graphics looked, decent for the 3DS for the DS. And I really just kind of enjoyed it. I remember playing it in high school and it being like a breath of fresh air for Final Fantasy games, sort of that old school vibe, but like some of the newer sort of luxuries, I guess you could say. Great game. I ranked it 8th actually overall.
Oh, wow. Okay, so for me, once we go from 11 to 10th, to me, that's kind of like a big jump. So my bottom three are fairly distant from the next.
I agree.
Group of
Me
games.
too.
So here, again, my biggest problem with this game is, to me personally, it's kind of forgettable. The characters, to me, none of them really stick out much. It's still a fairly generic RPG story. And I think by the time you get to the third game in the series, I would expect a little bit more. But I think if you objectively look at it, it's still much better than the games that came before it. So I think the job system, you could swap jobs, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that was definitely a cool step forward. I think that's something that I always like to see in a game, even modern games, is having swappable classes. So to me, that's cool. And I think this game also introduced summons to Final Fantasy for the first time.
That's quite possible. Yeah, because you had a summoner class, so that would make sense. You didn't have a summoner prior to that.
Exactly. So to me, that's kind of added another big staple to the game. So I ranked this 10th, obviously. 3 games worse than it. But again, at this point, we're getting into good, I think, games that are starting to be a little bit more replayable. Say the first 3 aren't really games that I would run out and replay, or my worst 3 games aren't ones that I would run out and replay, but Final Fantasy 3, I'd definitely go back and give it another go.
So I ranked it 9th, but it feels weird with these rankings for these remakes, right? Because this isn't what the game originally was.
Yeah.
So in the original 3, I don't think they had names. I could be wrong.
They didn't. They were Onion Knight,
but you didn't have Lunith or Ark and all these characters. And I actually really liked those characters. I really liked the art style of 3.
Yeah.
The character designs I thought were really cool. And I could be wrong. Like I haven't seen that. Well, it's right here actually, but I feel like that art style kind of continued on to the Bravely Default series.
Yep.
Like that feels very similar, and I am a big fan of that art style.
I feel like it's the same team, man.
Same character designers.
I'm pretty
and
sure
stuff,
like the team, they made 3 and then 4 remake, and then I think they made Warriors of Light or whatever, 4 Warriors of Light, and then Bravely Default.
Right. Okay.
I could be wrong, but
that makes sense.
I believe that to be true.
And I'm a big fan of that art style, so maybe that contributes to why I like the game so much. But it's interesting because I feel like 1, they were very focused on simple classes, bare bones. 2, story focused, and 3, I felt like they went back more towards 1, focusing on not so in-depth character building, but more so just a very fun experience with different classes and different customization that you can in your gameplay styles, I guess, right? Yeah. How you want to play the game is really up to you. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun playthrough. Even today, I would go back and replay it. Like it was just fun. But yeah, nothing crazy, no in-depth story, not a lot of character building, just a fun game.
Yeah, fun game. I agree.
All right, so moving forward to Final Fantasy IV, released in Japan in 1991 and also released in North America in 1991.
Yeah, short turnaround. So this is the first Final Fantasy that I would say there are many people out there, not us, who would say this is their favorite Final Fantasy game. Mm-hmm. Again, I've never played the original Super Nintendo version. You can call me out on it if you want.
It's weird.
I would like to. Unfortunately, it's really not that accessible today to play the original. I think it's available on Wii, Virtual Console, maybe Wii U. I don't, but I'm not sure.
Virtual Console's gone now too, isn't it?
Yeah. So really, you can play the remake. I have the SNES Classic. It only has Final Fantasy III, which is 6. So really, it's not easy for me to play, in terms of modern marketplaces or whatever. But yes, this is a big Final Fantasy game. This really sort of is a next level in storytelling for sure. And I only played the DS remake, which was done by the same team as 3. And I really like it, but I actually like it less than 3. I found the art style did not work as well when trying to tell a serious story. So for me, it wasn't my favorite. It was a lot harder from what I know. They cranked up the difficulty big time in 4, and I found it to actually be a bit of a turnoff. I normally like hard RPGs, but for me, it felt like it just made it really grindy and unnecessarily challenging. Apparently, the SNES version is one of the easiest Final Fantasies, actually.
Wow.
So they're probably trying to correct for that.
Right.
But cool characters. Obviously, Cecil going from Dark Knight to Paladin is an iconic moment in video games. And it sort of harkens back to that sort of, changing classes in a way. But every character has a more set class basically that they stick to. And I guess another problem for me is, you don't really get a settled cast of characters until the end of the game. And that's a nitpick for me that I don't really like in a lot of these older JRPGs. When you don't have a settled class, I prefer to sort of have a well-oiled team, but I feel like you're always switching up. You can never plan to keep these characters around too long.
Right.
But and a big thing it introduces is the active time battle system, which they went on to use in the next 5 games. So that was a huge improvement. And I'm sure at the time, like having to make those quick decisions really made it a lot more exciting and action oriented. So, I commend it for that. If I had played this when it first came out, I'm sure it'd be much higher on my rankings. But for me, I ranked it 9th place.
Okay. So again, this was probably one of the ones that I played the least. I probably got halfway through it again on mobile, so a little bit different. But I really, really like the characters in this game. So they kind of grabbed my attention right from the beginning. Really like Cecil and Kane. I really love kind of the knight aspect of those characters, the knightly aspect. So to me, that's really cool. And I like the fact that game actually has, I think much more so than the previous 3, it actually starts taking character development seriously in the story. So to me, that's huge because I need my Final Fantasy games to have character development. So that's kind of another huge element that this game added, as well as, the active time battle system, which I really like. So to me, I would probably put the characters in this game. I would probably nominate them as one of the games with the best characters in the Final Fantasy series. So to me, that kind of elevates this up to 6th place.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you guys said for the most part. I really like this game. I think it was the first big step towards like a real great story being told in the Final Fantasy series. There is a lot of character development, obviously, with Cecil and even Kane. I guess we really don't get that at the end, but he's like manipulated all the way through the entire game, and it seems like at the end, like there's a lot going on there. Did you ever play the sequel to this, the After?
No,
I didn't either, but I always wanted to go back and play it. But
yeah, it would be worth a try someday.
Yeah, no, great story. Again, I played the 3D or the DS remake. I like the art style. I mean, not a lot to be said. The only difference, I guess, between me and you in our feelings is that I enjoy the expanded cast. I like that we got these different people from different parts of the world for short little periods.
Yeah.
And that we got to experience them and these different play styles and classes throughout it.
Yeah.
And I feel that's obviously goes into it happens a lot more in future games as well, like 6. But yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was great. Expansive cast, great story, great character development, good game. So the next is Final Fantasy V in 19.
Sorry, Alex.
Yep.
I missed what you ranked that one.
Oh, sorry. I ranked that as 7th.
Okay, cool.
The next game is Final Fantasy V, released in Japan in 1991 and in North America in 1999. And that would have been through
Final Fantasy Anthology.
Yeah,
so it was released with 5 and 6. 6 the first time that it was rebranded as 6 in North America, not 3.
Right.
Yeah. So we didn't get to play it until 1999.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this game.
You do.
I have. It's grown into a bit of a love, actually, I would say, for this game, because I originally played it probably the early 2000s. And I played it on the anthology version. I got all the way to the end, to the X-Death battle, and I was underleveled, and I sort of gave up at the final boss out of frustration or whatever, and not wanting to go back. So I always had this, desire to go back and defeat X-Death and like see this game through. So a few years passed, I played through it again, and I did beat X-Death, and I got a lot deeper into like, some of the side quests and like getting, the better armor and stuff like that. And it was weirdly nostalgic for me, because I was like, oh, I remember all of this stuff. And when I first played it, it was a bit frustrating, but now playing it again, more mature lens, I really liked it. I loved all the characters. They grew on me, and I love the job system, expanded version of 3's, the world. The characters are really good. I think this game is underrated. This is possibly the most underrated Final Fantasy. And to me, it really encapsulates sort of the 4 games leading up to it. And I think it combines it into sort of the perfect
capstone.
It's like takes the best of all those 4 games and it combines them into one solid package.
Right.
It's got a great job system. It's got the active time battle. It's got good characters. It's got a cool world. It's got a cool villain. X-Death is underrated. And I think if this game had been released between 4 and 6 when they originally came out on SNES, it would be a lot higher in the general opinion.
Sure.
I think if this game had come out at that time, it would have been a lot more groundbreaking. We didn't even get the job system from 3 because it hadn't come out in North America yet.
True.
So I think in Japan it is pretty well regarded. So I think that plays a lot into it. I think it kind of got forgotten, and it's really a shame that they didn't release it. And I don't know why they didn't, because it's such a good game. And Gilgamesh, shout out to Gilgamesh, such an awesome enemy.
True.
Battle of the Bridge, one of the best Final Fantasy tracks. This was Sakaguchi's last game that he directed up until 9, I think. So this kind of felt like changing of the guard. Like this is sort of this is like the end of a chapter for me.
Right.
And then, the next few games really definitely took the series forward into a great direction. But This is like old school Final Fantasy at its best for me. That's how I really feel about it. I really like this game. I ranked it 5th.
Wow.
Yep.
That's huge.
Yep.
All right. So I pretty much agree with what you said, Jeremy. I spent a lot less time with this game than you probably did. And again, I played it on mobile, so it's probably suffering in my ratings a bit because of that. But I really did like the characters in this game. I think the characters are, this is probably one of the more underrated character casts at the very least. I really like Galif, the old guy.
Yeah.
He's always pretty funny. And Ferris, the pirate captain. I mean, any game with a pirate captain is going to catch my attention.
Especially one who is pretending to be a man or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I generally like 5. This is a game that I definitely do want to go back and play the whole way through again. But I definitely think it was like a consolidation. I think it wasn't. I don't know if it was as groundbreaking as any of the games that came before it. But I think it was just well done and a solid kind of entry in the series. So I ranked it 9th because of that. I won't necessarily say that it's not deserving of a higher place, but for me, it just doesn't jump out as, deserving a place above some of the games that kind of came after it. So 9th for me.
So I ranked it 10th. Again, there's a big gap, I feel like, between the bottom 3 games and the rest of the series.
Yeah, I think we can all agree to that.
Yeah, but 5 for me, everything you said, it was true. Great story, great characters, awesome job system. If it had been released when it originally should have been, it would have been probably a classic for most people.
Yep.
But for me, I think it was because I was playing it around the same time I was playing all the other Final Fantasies. I was going through and beating all these old games I hadn't played, that it kind of got lost, I feel like. Where games like 4, I felt like knowing when it was, like when it came out in the order, it just did it better for me in terms of character development. Classes, no, for sure 5 had the best class system. It definitely was probably superior to the original 3, and it may have been better than the 3 remake. I don't really remember, but probably. But yeah, it just didn't feel special and like it did anything differently. It felt, as you said, like a consolidation. Like it did everything that 1 through 4 did and put into one package and did it, and it was great.
Yeah,
but it just didn't do anything special for me. Whereas 6, which we'll get into, like I thought did. Where you said that was the best of classic Final Fantasy, for me that's 6, but 5 is a fantastic game for sure.
Yeah, and no, those are all super fair points. And I think me having played it the second time,
right,
really changed. Because if you had asked me 3 years ago before I replayed it, the ranking would have been much lower.
And maybe I should go back sometime and play it fresh when I haven't played any other Final Fantasy games and just go through.
My goal someday, hopefully in the next decade, or sometime, is to play. I'll probably skip 2.
Yeah.
I just want to play the original versions if they're available of each. Yeah. So I'll go through and play the original versions and see how I think about them.
But yeah, great game. I ranked it 10th, but even though that seems low on the rankings, it is actually a fantastic game.
Yeah.
So next up is Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy III in North America. Came out in Japan in 1994 and also in North America in 1994.
Do we want to maybe change the rotation for this one? So maybe Joe goes first.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Then just switch it around.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think that makes sense, because you're going to be the dissenting voice here, Jeremy, a little bit. So, so Final Fantasy VI, I agree with what Alex said, that this is the best of kind of the classic Final Fantasies, and I mean it's very widely, at least in the running, as the best Final Fantasy game in the series. So this one's a huge one. What I like about the game is that I think it brings the storytelling in Final Fantasy to a whole nother level that it never really reached before. And it still is probably one of the best Final Fantasy stories, if not the best Final Fantasy stories that we've had yet. Personally, I can see why some people would make the argument that it's the best Final Fantasy and that it has the best story. To me, the story is a little bit overrated. Not hugely overrated, but a little bit overrated. I think there's better stories in Final Fantasy, but it's definitely up there. I think the characters, I think what they did really well in this game is it has a big cast of characters, but it also manages to spend a lot of time on individual moments developing the characters. And that's what I like. And I like that in games that follow too, where sometimes the game just kind of slows down and gives you a moment to just enjoy the characters. And that's, I think, where Final Fantasy VI really adds a lot to the series, is kind of making that an important part of the game. I think this game had really sick villains. Like, I mean, you have Kefka is probably one of the best villains in Final Fantasy. Well, definitely one of the best villains in Final Fantasy. He's just a complete maniac. And I like the fact that as opposed to some of the bosses that come before and some of the bosses, like main villains that come after, he's not like a shadowy villain. He's just an in-your-face the whole game type villain. And that, I think, is kind of unique for Final Fantasy VI. And I like that about Final Fantasy VI. I think I liked the change. Again, I like high fantasy settings in RPGs, but I think Final Fantasy VI did a really good job of switching to a new setting and really mixing the series up. And I think they worked it into the story. Like, it's an integral part of the story that they worked in really well. So I really like that. So really for this game, it really does a lot well. The world's amazing. The story is really good and the characters are really awesome. So definitely one of the best. I've ranked it as number 3. I could say that because it's 3, you know, it's widely considered one of the best. I'm ranking it 3, or no, I'm ranking it 4, sorry. It was a toss-up between this and another game for 3, but I ultimately rated it 4th. Widely considered one of the best, but for me, I think I just played it at the wrong time. It doesn't have that nostalgia factor, and without the nostalgia factor, there's other games I think that I find to be better. So number 4 for me.
So my opinion of 6 is an unpopular one. I think there's probably just something wrong with me, fundamentally. But I think a lot of these rankings for us is really like, how do we play at the time in our lives when we played it? What format did we play it under? And for me, for whatever reason, I played this game in fits and starts. You know, I didn't like play through it in 1 month. Like, I played half of the game 1 month and then the other half like a couple months later, you know, and I was kind of like, you know, had to remember a few things. So one thing, my dislikes for it, I really like this game. It's a really good game. I can see why everyone likes it. But I have sort of nitpicky reasons why I don't enjoy it as much. The large cast of characters, I do not like that. I'd be much happier if there was 8 characters. What is there, 14, 16?
I think it's 14.
14. If the cast was 8, I would like it a lot more. Similar to my criticisms of 4, you never really get to spend that much time with a set party. And that's just an annoyance for me in general. I don't like the world of Rune. I know, crazy. I like the first half of the game a lot.
Right.
The second half, I don't enjoy it. I feel like maybe this wasn't a trope at the time, but I feel like in JRPGs, this is a huge trope. The world gets, you know, you go to a dark world or you go to the underworld or something like, and I find that's kind of overplayed. And I guess I played this later. This was actually the last Final Fantasy that I beat. Like that I hadn't beaten already. And so for me, that sort of storyline was already kind of played out, but I really love the Esper system. Probably like the most fun ability system of the first 6 outside of, I really like the job system from 5. So I would give it to 5, but to me, it sort of is in line with the materia system.
100%.
And similar to the junction system in those ways, just the way that you use ability points to gain these abilities, and you know, you're getting these abilities from an outside source that's not your character necessarily.
Yeah,
I really like that, and I think, you know, the direction that they took that in the next few games worked really well. I really like 6. For whatever reason, it just doesn't click with me, and I ranked it 7th. Overall, which is pretty high, and it's just kind of misunderstood for me, and I'm gonna give it another try someday, and you know, see if my opinion changes at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I really like 6. I ranked it second. This was kind of it's not the first Final Fantasy I really dug into. That was 7, but it was my introduction to Final Fantasy on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So for me, I just actually went back and beat this game. It would have only been a couple of years ago, I guess now, but I absolutely love it. All these games, just a general note, all the soundtrack in all these games is pretty fantastic.
Uematsu, man.
Yeah,
They're so good.
They're all great. But 6 really stood out to me.
Terra's theme, the overworld theme.
Yeah.
Love that.
Oh, it's
Great
sticks in your head forever.
Yeah.
But even storyline wise, like, considering that video games were an up and coming medium at the time, like thinking about the game in the context of when it released, that it was a medium that was just really growing, that it was aimed at young adults, to have a storyline where like you work your way up to this, you are about to fight the Emperor, he dies, and you mess up, and Kefka destroys the world. Like in fiction, I guess not a big deal. Like I'm sure that's happened quite a bit.
Yeah.
But in video games, I feel like for a lot of people, this was like a big moment where
totally.
you lost, you messed up, the world's now destroyed, a lot of people died, and you have to kind of put yourselves together and come back and beat the bad guy. And I think that's what really cool. I think the way that they presented the characters, as Joe kind of mentioned, and we discussed, like, it's not really your thing.
Yeah.
Having these different characters at different parts of the world. You like a central story with a party
I like a close-knit cast.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Where I really enjoyed this, having the different parts of your party split up over the world, kind of seeing the events of the game unfold simultaneously from these different perspectives. I really enjoyed that. And as Joe said, it really allowed for more in-depth character building of these individual storylines related to these characters, rather than just following the main character in this group through. So I really, really like 6. I think the combat was great. The Magicite system, really great. Espers are cool. Cool story, cool characters.
Yep.
Love the game. Second for me.
I can't argue with any of those points. Like I said, there's just something wrong with me.
So next on the list is Final Fantasy VII, released in Japan and North America in 1997.
Alex, why don't you start this one?
Okay.
Just because it feels right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I ranked Final Fantasy VII at number 1. I love this game. This was a defining game in video games for me. It was my first RPG, and I beat it numerous times, as many people have. You probably, like, everybody has.
Yeah.
It's a huge game for a lot of people, but I feel like not only was the soundtrack amazing, the characters are amazing. The setting, the like steampunk-ish, or I don't even know. It's not even steampunk. It's more advanced than that, but
Steampunk, cyberpunk.
It's very unique. I feel like it was not like anything that had come before. It took Final Fantasy in a new direction. It took video games in a lot of ways in a new direction. It's massive. It's 3 discs long, which is kind of unheard of at the time. I mean, I'm sure around that time there are other RPGs that big, but what it did, obviously, spoilers, the death of Aerith, whatever.
Not a spoiler at this point.
I know, but like that, again, a super defining moment in video games where a girl who was in your party for, I don't even know how long, 20 hours at that point, who was a love interest for the main character, is killed off. Like, that's huge. And I mean, obviously Final Fantasy there've been deaths in 5 and 4. I think a lot of the 4 ones got reversed, but whatever. It was just, it touched the players emotionally in a way that I feel like it hadn't been done maybe in that medium to that extent before, which was very, very unique. Has a great customizable materia system that allows you to do a lot with your characters, like a lot, actually, if you really dive in to the combinations you can do. It's pretty cool. The soundtrack, again, incredible. I mean, for me, it's one of the greatest games ever made for me. So it's hard to even define like what makes it so great, because there's just so much. Like, the post-game content is amazing. There's a ton of side quests and mini games and stuff. The chocobo breeding into, going to get Knights of the Round and all that. Like it's just such a comprehensive, like such an incredible package that you just don't get in video games nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can honestly agree with everything you said. There's no Final Fantasy game, or any game for that matter, that feels quite like Final Fantasy VII.
No.
The setting is very, very unique.
Very unique.
I think the story is very relevant to today,
Oh,
to today's
100%.
climate, big time. They're basically environmental terrorists. That's super cool. The materia system is possibly the best ability system in terms of its customization and all that. I mean, what hasn't been said about Final Fantasy VII? It's a great game. It's one of the essential video games that everyone probably should play. And I ranked it number 2. I really like this game. I think I have a slightly different perspective, mainly because it wasn't my first Final Fantasy, which it was for so many people. And I think your first matters a lot, which we'll get into later.
For sure.
But 7 is undeniable. Like, people try to hate on it and stuff, but honestly, even if you don't like the game, you have to admit what it did for the gaming industry and its strengths, and it's just its uniqueness. So, I think it's fully deserving of all its praise.
Yeah, no, this is the big one for me. So Final Fantasy VII, probably the greatest game ever made.
Yeah.
I know I go back and forth because, when we talk about The Witcher, I'm like, The Witcher is really good. But when I really sit and think about it, Final Fantasy VII is just, what a game should be in my mind. So I could just take like give me an hour-long monologue here, and I'll sum up what I think about Final Fantasy VII.
Okay, start the clock, Alex.
All right, so I know, I've read some stuff about some people don't really think that the graphics hold up to today. Graphics 100% hold up to today. I still prefer graphics in Final Fantasy VII with pre-rendered backgrounds and the CGI kind of cutscenes to some of the stuff I get in video games today. I mean, obviously, graphical quality, you can't argue, is worse. But the artisticness of it and what it brings the atmosphere of the game is just, unreal. Obviously, the character cast is unbelievable. And I think what I really like about this game, and what I really like about, throughout this game in general, is there's a lot of small moments that I think are probably, when I think back, some of my favorite moments that really just bring the characters in the game to life. And, I think of moments like, when you're stopped in calm and you're just kind of relaxing and thinking back on the character's past. When you stop, they have the parade in Junin, and you've got kind of Rufus doing his little military parade, and you're kind of off. I think you end up in a bar and you end up drinking with the Turks. Like little things like that really bring not just like the main cast to life, but it brings all the other characters to life for me as well. I really, really like the antagonists in Final Fantasy VII. So, I mean, obviously you have the big final villain in Sephiroth, but also, you have a ton of smaller antagonists throughout the game, and they constantly keep bringing in new kind of adversaries along the way. But I always feel like I like those antagonists to some extent. Like I find them either cool, or I can kind of see that they're just, a conflicted character. So even if they're only there for a short time, you don't see a lot of them, they're still memorable to me. So for example, the Turks, I feel like all the Turks feel somewhat individual, and they often, they're the bad guys, but I feel like for them, it's not personal. They don't have anything against you. So they're kind of like, if you weren't on their bad side, they'd be cool people. But because they've been given a job, they're going to hunt you down. So I really like pretty much everyone to do with Shinra. And there's so many other unique ones because you've got, Professor Hojo, you've got Heidegger. Rufus is, I think he's a really cool adversary, even though, again, he's not necessarily there through the entire game. So I think the game just packs so much kind of dense content and a dense cast of characters that I really like. I like that the story is kind of mysterious throughout. You don't really know what's going on at every point of the game. You know where you're trying to go, but you don't really know what the end goal is. So I think it brings a lot of mystery to the game that doesn't really get resolved until closer to the end, and I like that. I think Midgar, especially, is, even though we're not there for long, it's still one of my favorite cities and settings in any video game. I think the rest of the world was cool, but Midgar definitely stands out as kind of one of the best. The combat system, I think the combat system, again, it's dated because we try to do a lot more complicated things today. But I think the materia system was a really cool way to customize characters. And to me, again, I don't necessarily need groundbreaking, super complicated, flashy combat. I just need something simple that works and lets me have fun. And kind of the Final Fantasy VII battle system does that for me. I'll keep going. How much? I got 45 minutes left, 55 minutes left.
Yeah, you're good, man. You still have lots of time.
I like the introduction. I like the, I don't know if it was the first time they did this, but limit breaks. The limit breaks were just so cool and satisfying in this game. Like I wanted to collect them all. I wanted to use them all. They actually were extremely functional and cool looking, which is something that I think later games try to bring in new kind of mechanics to use, but they don't end up being that useful and as cool as you want them to be. So limit breaks are really awesome. And then I think just this game, I think maybe more than any other game in Final Fantasy, to me, it just has a lot of cool stuff to do and like Easter eggs in the end game. So you've got, the ultimate weapons that you can go fight. You can do chocobo breeding. You can do chocobo racing. You go get the Knights of the Round. There's just so much to do at the end, like optional material that's not related to the main game, which I think was probably the first game that had so much end game material to do in the series. So again, I could go on, but to me, this game has the best cast of characters in any Final Fantasy. It has the best story in any Final Fantasy. To me, it has some of the best combat. Again, objectively, maybe some people may not agree with that, but I really enjoyed the combat, and it has one of the best worlds. So easily for me, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's my monologue over with 50 minutes to spare. We'll have to do another podcast, Alex. Me, you, maybe Stuart.
Yeah. And maybe.
Well, I don't get to fucking. I've only been.
You don't
twice,
deserve it. You said it's only number 2. Can't have no haters on this podcast.
Yeah, such
You're not a true fan.
Yeah, a little note going forward, I guess. The pre-render backgrounds, Lost Art, those are incredible pieces of art.
You ever
go
I have on the internet and you just go through these, like, I've looked at like I think of like Chrono Cross.
Those
ones, and like
me too.
7, 8, 9.
Yep.
Just go through those pre-rendered backgrounds. They're so nice.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, they hold up real well.
All right, so that's 7, number 1. So Final Fantasy VIII, released in Japan and North America in 1999. Jeremy, you should probably start with this one, right? This is your.
So
I think you got this highest.
Yeah, do I have it the highest?
No, you don't actually.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Well, I'm going to start with it anyways, I guess. This is kind of the black sheep of the Final Fantasy series for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I like it a lot. I really love Squall. That's the main thing. He's probably my favorite main character. I just love his whole look. Playing as a teenager, he really, for some reason, that sort of moody, emo sort of, I loved his internal monologue. That was really cool. And he was just kind of a loner. And I guess sometimes I felt like a bit of a loner. So I just kind of related to Squall. The summons are really cool in this game.
GFs. The
GFs are really cool. Again, it's got the active time battle system, which is fun. I love that you can press R1 when you're attacking the Squall and you get that extra damage.
Renzoken.
That made battles really interesting. And his limit break, Renzo Koken or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, whatever it's called.
That was really fun. But this game is unbalanced. And that's probably why what did I rank it? I ranked it number 3rd. This game is unbalanced. Junction system is super fun, and if you don't understand it, this game is hard as fuck. If you do understand it, this game is extremely easy.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, if you're level 100, this game is super hard. If you're level 50, this game is super easy. Things like that make this game very weird. And it's kind of similar in some ways. Obviously, it's much, much better. It's kind of similar to FF2 in its experimental nature, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
They try a lot of different things. It's kind of a left turn from Final Fantasy VII. Probably not what most people were expecting. The world's very interesting. It's a very modern sort of setting. It's not even, it's still fantasy, but it's, you know, it feels sort of modern day inspired.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
well, Esther's futuristic.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. And there is Esther as well, but I don't know. It's a very strange, odd world. It almost kind of feels like some of it doesn't fit together and which is weird because in 7, you know, you have all this variety too, but it seems to all be more cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you guys are probably surprised that I put 7 above 8.
Yeah, I am.
And this is a lot of going back to what I said about it. Does it hold up today? I think it holds up not as good. Triple Triad is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best card games, you know, in an RPG, which is a thing that, you know, there's a few card games in RPGs. Squall's cool, Renault is cool. The rest of the characters, they're kind of so-so. This is more of a game. This is a ranking for me that's from the heart. I'm really fond of this game, but I can also admit that it's very unbalanced and not the strongest really representation of what Final Fantasy is for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I still really love it, and the music's great. And I don't know, this is a weird one. What do you guys think?
So for me, I rated this number 2. I love Final Fantasy VIII. So again, I acknowledge that this is probably higher than most people would rate it. But I personally really loved the story in 8 and the characters in 8. So regarding the story, I have kind of a soft spot for this. Start from pretty much the bottom as nothing and build up, which is what most RPGs should be. But here you're starting as students in basically a military academy. So you really are starting from, you know, the bottom. And I love the military, like the beginning parts of it is all kind of you're working on missions for CD. I think that's how that's said. I always thought of it as seed, but I think it's CD. Anyways, so I love the whole military academy and then the moving garden aspects of the game, and sort of that you feel like you're part of an organization instead of just being a small group. You are a small group of kind of elite people, but you also have the backing of kind of an organization at some parts. I think the world's really diverse, which I like. Especially, like, you get to go into space, you get to go to Esther, which is like super futuristic. So to me, that's kind of a positive. It really kept mixing things up for me. What I think was one of my favorite parts was the love story between Squall and Renoa. It kind of led to some really, really nice moments. The dancing moments memorable at the Seed military ball.
I love the song that plays.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite song.
That's one of my favorite songs too.
Yeah. I think there's the point where I think it's in Fisherman's Cove when Squall and Renault are kind of
Fisherman's Horizon, isn't it?
Fisherman's Horizon, yeah.
Fisherman's Cove's an Eastern Passage.
Close enough. But anyways, I love that. Like, I love those little moments in that game, and again, this is another game that has, you know, some nice quiet moments between the characters. And I do like the other cast. Like, I like Zell, I like Cypher. Cypher's really cool to me. I liked kind of the darkness of Ultimisia. She was a cool, like, super dark villain, more so than some others in the series. I think for me, I can forgive. Again, I don't have a super high standard for what I require out of the combat systems and stuff. To me, this was a fun combat game. I didn't know what the hell was going on with weapons. I think I used the beginning weapons at the end of the game. I don't think I ever changed weapons. Yeah, I fought Ultimisia with starting weapons.
Well, you probably weren't level 100 then, because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do it. Probably.
No, I think it was like level 55, 60 maybe.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have had
I had nothing. So I'll tell you, I didn't bother doing anything before the Ultimisia battle to get anything back except items. I think I could use items, but to be honest, that fighting Ultimisia endgame, that's my favorite endgame boss fight in any Final Fantasy.
Yeah, me too.
So I played it with Nick, and we both took turns trying, and it took us like 20 tries again because we had nothing. And he would play and I'd cross all my fingers, praying for like the RNG gods to work in our favor. And then I'd play and he'd do the same thing. Eventually, I think we beat him just by using tons of like Hero's Aura, which basically just gives you limit break over and over again. But we could do nothing else. So it was like just limit break the hell out of the guy or out of Ultimisia over and over again and hope you kill her before she kills you. Because we couldn't even really heal. It was just Hero's Aura, Hero's Aura, Hero's Aura. And eventually on the 20th try it worked. So to me, that adds a lot to the game. So yeah, Triple Triad, you've already mentioned. That was a lot of fun. So for me, the game has definitely some of the best characters in any Final Fantasy for me. I would say one of the best stories, probably my second favorite story in a Final Fantasy. And then one of the best worlds for me. So for me, number 2.
All right. So for me, I ranked it number 4. I will say that I feel like Final Fantasy VIII is one of the better games, but I feel like because it came so close to 7, it gets directly compared to it. And I feel like they're very different games, and 7 is a lot lighter, for me, a lot brighter and happier, where this is a lot darker. And I feel like in the general public, that the general, I guess, consensus is that's probably why it's ranked lower. But I think it's a fantastic game. One of the harder games I leveled up to 100. I found it hard as hell. Ultimisia, dude, is probably the hardest boss fight in any Final Fantasy.
She's hard. I beat Omega Weapon on level 100. It literally is what Joe said. Praying to the RNG gods. But also then you do need to have the ultimate equipment at that point, because otherwise you're fucked.
But I don't know how. Joe, did you say you didn't junction throughout the game? Is that what he said?
No, he didn't change his weapons.
I didn't change my weapons.
Okay.
So you can junction, but I didn't make you could craft better weapons, right?
Yeah, because you had to craft your weapons.
Your whole strategy was aura, but when you only have revolver, you only have the first limit break. You wouldn't even have Lionheart. So you would just be spamming like Braver essentially the entire game.
Lionheart hits like 20 times or something like that? Oh my God.
And the first one hits like once. So you just be doing...
Oh, Joe, that's insane.
That's why it was tough even at a low level.
It's a hard game. It's weird because it can be really hard or really fucking easy.
But another issue I don't like is that, in some games, your other party members who aren't in your party didn't level. So at that section where you split your party and one goes to the Galbanian missile base or whatever, my guys were like level 12, where my other guys were like level 40 or 50. So the enemies at the base were scaled up to my other guys.
Oh my God.
It took me weeks to get through there.
How'd you do it?
I have no idea. It was really, really hard. It was
insane.
It was not good. But no, it's a great game. As you guys said, there's a huge focus on like romance, which is really cool. It had a cool, interesting story. I like the GF system. It is interesting. It is different. Yeah, a great game, really. It is. I just felt like it was at a weird time where it got directly compared to 7, and then 9 came so soon after. That a lot of it just really and truly an amazing time for JRPGs.
Golden age.
Yeah, the golden age.
Yeah,
but great game.
I just want to throw out a few moments I just thought of that I really like.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe my favorite moment in a Final Fantasy game happens in this one, or at least one of my favorite sequences happens in Final Fantasy VIII. And that's the assassination attempt on Edia.
Yeah.
That's cool. Really cool.
End
it's
of
super
one.
Tense. They really ham it up, splitting between the two groups of characters. Mm-hmm. And then when she stops the bullet, it's like, oh, fuck. We're in trouble now. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that one up. I also like the sequences where you switch to Laguna.
Shout out to Laguna. I was going to say that too. Shout out to Laguna.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Who's Squall's dad?
Yeah, it's implied, I think.
So pretty cool.
What's it called? Man with a Machine Gun or whatever?
Yeah.
Such a good song. Holy God. Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
All right. So lots of cool, memorable moments. So, yeah.
Why don't you start this one off, Alex?
Which one?
The next
9?
one. Yeah. We'll
all right, you
switch
should
the
probably be.
rotation.
Yeah,
I'll go last.
Okay. Next up, as Jeremy just said, Final Fantasy IX, released in North America and Japan in 2000. So this is probably the Final Fantasy I actually forget the most. I played all the older ones more recently. This one I beat when I was probably 13 years old, and I don't think I've replayed it. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I thought at the time it was a great game. Goofy world, goofy characters. I don't know if it's the proportions of the characters or what, but it felt very kind of silly to me. Obviously a throwback to classic Final Fantasy setting, which is different than from what we've had current, like in the past couple iterations, starting with 6 all the way through 8. Classic kind of character customization. They each have their individual jobs that you gain abilities through equipping different equipments. Limit breaks were cool. I guess the focus on summons and stuff was really cool. Story wise, the characters are interesting. Always kind of sucked that we never got Beatrix or whatever on our team. Always thought she was a really cool character.
Yeah, she was cool.
It was fun to play with her for a bit.
It was. I thought she was really cool. I always hoped there was a way at the end to get her or something. You never could. I mean, I really don't have too much more to say about it. I ranked it 5th because it was a good game. It just, I need to replay it. It was a great game when I played it. I remember really enjoying it. Big game, cool characters. I really want to play it again. Freya seems really cool. I remember not appreciating her enough. I feel like I'd appreciate her as a character a lot more now.
Yeah. Yeah, Freya's really cool.
All right, so Final Fantasy IX, this one really appealed to me right from the beginning because, again, I like more medieval high fantasy style stuff. So this one kind of had a natural advantage to me when I played it. I really like how, even though it still is sort of medieval high fantasy, they still mixed in a little bit of tech. So you still have like airships. The airships in that game are really cool. The whole idea of air transport being the main way of getting around because it's not safe to really travel on the ground was a really cool way to mix things up. Because obviously there was the mist that created monsters, so it was safer to travel by air. That was really cool. The characters for me in this one it was not my favorite cast of characters, not my least favorite either, but just like, I think the main problem I have is, to me, Zidane, he's one of the weaker leading main characters. So to me, the rest of the characters were stronger than him. So I think that's why I just don't appreciate that cast of characters as much. I like a lot of the kind of supporting cast in the game. I like Beatrix, like you said. I like Zorn and Thorn were really cool. They're like the court jesters. I don't know if you really remember them, Alex, but they were like the court jesters that really follow you around. They work for Kuja.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Again, Kuja is not my favorite villain, but he was pretty cool. But I think what really shines for me in this game is the world itself. So starting in Alexandria, straight out of like a fairy tale, cool like Disney style castle. That was awesome. Lindblum, I think I'll say Lindblum, and then you've got Trino. I'd say between Lindblum, Alexandria, and Trino, those three are easily within my top 5 Final Fantasy settings or cities in all of Final Fantasy. So to me, the world was stacked in this game. And then the rest, like the story and the characters, were pretty decent. The world always kind of felt full of life. You had kind of multiple nations, which added like a cool element to the game as well. So yeah, overall, to me, this game really shines on its world. Easily the best world in any Final Fantasy for me.
Wow.
So because of that, I ranked it 3rd. And this one I was going back and forth because to me, in my heart, having played it and thinking back and letting nostalgia seep in, Final Fantasy IX is definitely 3rd. But I had trouble placing this one and Final Fantasy VI, just because Final Fantasy VI objectively is probably the better game. It has the better cast of characters, definitely has the better story, but Final Fantasy IX, the world really sucked me in. And I spent a lot of time, actually, I think playing your copy, Alex. I think you lent me Final Fantasy IX.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and it worked out to be one of my favorite Final Fantasies. So thanks for that. All right. So so Final Fantasy 9, number 3 for me.
All right. So Final Fantasy 9. This was the first Final Fantasy I ever played.
Wow.
Yes. Well, I think maybe I played Final Fantasy Adventure on Game Boy, but that's technically a mana game.
Yeah.
And I had my friends who had played 7 and 8, so I was aware of these games, but for whatever reason, I don't think I had a PlayStation. Is probably the reason why.
Right. Yeah.
So 9 was the first one. I got it for Christmas from my mom, and this was my first introduction to the series, and it sort of has this magical space in my heart, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like as Joe said, you know, the different nations within the Mist continent is very cool, and specifically the Mist continent, which is basically just one, is very interesting, you know, sort of location. You know, you're walking through the world map, and it's all sort of covered in mist, and it's very kind of mysterious sort of vibes. And each sort of continent has its own vibe too. So I feel like the Mist continent sort of in the south, and then to the north, there's another continent where like the dwarves are, and that's where you meet Eiko, and there's like the sort of summoner, I don't know, it's a shrine or something like that. It's been a while since I played it. I really like the cast of characters. Zidane, he's one of my favorite Final Fantasy main characters. I love that he's from a theater troupe that's also a thief guild, basically. Very interesting. The sort of opening moments of those games really sort of stick out to me.
Sure.
You're doing the play, but you're also trying to kidnap Princess Garnet. And you have to go through, you know, these various acts of this play. It's very sort of Shakespearean, I would influence, I would say.
Sure.
Love the character models.
Steiner's hilarious in that segment.
Yeah, Steiner's hilarious. And it is more of a lighthearted Final Fantasy. And to me, having it being my first one, not having, you know, the baggage of 7 and 8 to compare it to me, it wasn't a departure. This was just, it was what it was, you know? Yeah. And then looking back, having played the rest of the games, to me, this game, essentially for me, it is the purest representation of what Final Fantasy is as a series as a whole. And I think that's what the intent of it was.
Sure, yeah.
This was Sakaguchi's last Final Fantasy that he directed. And this was, I think, the last one he really had a major role in. It's his favorite Final Fantasy. That counts for something. The series creator holds this as his favorite. So I think, yes, it harkens back more to the pre-6 titles, and like I mentioned earlier, my love of 5. So it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that 9 would be my favorite. So to me, yeah, it just represents that sort of earlier Final Fantasy vibe. That on PlayStation 1, the graphics hold up really, really well today. I know we talked about 7's graphics like getting criticized and whatnot. But the pre-rendered backgrounds look amazing. The character models still look really good, and objectively, they look better than Final Fantasy VII character models. There's no comparison.
Oh no.
And the game really holds up. And I just think that, like, the translation too is much better than 7's and 8's. You know, but it all comes from the time that it was released too. You know, I think if 7 had been my first, it would probably be my favorite too. But you know, that's not the way it happened for me. And honestly, I wish Final Fantasy would do more of this. They've 9 was the last time they tried to do a medieval setting, you know, a true fantasy setting.
True.
And I think as good as 7 is, they're always trying to recapture that vibe of 7. And, you know, whether it be through the character designs or the combat system.
Yeah.
I feel like, and it's to the series' detriment that they place so much emphasis on 7. And I just think really, like, just let 7 be what it is.
I agree.
And sort of go back to that more old school vibe of Final Fantasy, because I think it's just kind of a pure lighthearted adventure, and the characters are really good. There's a lot of dimension there too. Like, really the theme of it is not knowing who you are. And Vivi, you know, he was created basically.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know like what his life means. And Zidane as well. He's like basically like, I don't even fucking know. He's like, what? Joe, can you help me out here? He's like a
genomes.
He's like some sort of clone.
He's like an artificial
thing. and him and
I don't quite
Kujar
remember.
are from the same like planet or wherever the fuck it is,
Mm.
Pandemonium. There's also
Mm.
Garland makes an
Yeah.
appearance
Oh, he's cool.
from Final Fantasy 1. That is really cool throwback.
Yeah.
So this game is just a loving throwback. I'll leave it at that. It's fine if it's not ranked as high for you guys, but to me, it's a really special game. And yeah, Final Fantasy
Rita's
9.
number one.
You're number one. My number
number one.
fifth. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's my fifth. Great game though. Great game. And that is kind of the end of like a
End of an era.
Some would consider it the golden era of Final Fantasy. I mean, 6 through 9, I think for a lot of people are some of the best games. But
Yeah.
Okay, onwards to the PS2 era with Final Fantasy X. We have released in Japan in 2001 and North America in 2000.
No,
That doesn't sound right to me.
That's not correct. 2001.
2001 for North America. Okay. Joe, do you want to start off with this one or do you want me to go first? You go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So Final Fantasy X. So this is a game that actually grew on me over time because when I first played it, it was the first Final Fantasy on PlayStation 2. So new system, high expectations because you were expecting a lot more out of the hardware itself. And so for me, initially, the big hang up I had was that it felt like a step back from what a Final Fantasy really was.
Wow.
Because you didn't have, and I think a lot of people would probably say this, you didn't have the first time, you didn't have that overworld that you could just, hop in an airship, float around. And that was a huge hang up for me at first. So if you had asked me after this game was initially released where I'd rank it, I would have ranked it probably much lower than I did. But partly, I think, because of the games that came after, I've really started to appreciate Final Fantasy X. First off, the voice acting was really good, and especially for the first voice acted Final Fantasy, they knocked it out of the park with the voice acting, especially with the English casting for the characters was awesome. So to me, those voices really do suit the characters, and they're iconic. Again, the characters, like the rest of the game, grew on me. Titus, I thought it was a cool character at first, but I didn't really think he was a particularly compelling character at first. But I think he does grow throughout the story, and you grow to appreciate him as kind of a leading character and the relationship that he kind of has with Yuna. So I do like the characters actually in 10. They definitely grew on me a lot. Combat in this game was really fun. So again, I don't need necessarily flashy combat, but this combat was really, really good. It holds up really well today. I still think it is one of the best combats in a Final Fantasy game. One area where, again, it still kind of lacks for me is the summons. Really? I found the summons just, they weren't, I don't know if I didn't find I used them a ton. They're not terrible, but I think compared to the summons in the previous 3 games, I wanted more out of summons. To me, they're more integral. I mean, they were integral to the story, but I didn't find them necessarily as integral to the combat. The world, when I look back at it, feels nice. But again, I like games with a lot of cities, and this game just didn't have tons of cities. I think it had Luca you could classify as a city. Xanarkand you didn't really spend time in. So other than that, it's more of like rural setting. And I found the antagonists were a little bit underwhelming. So you got Seymour and Jekt and Sin. Sin especially is like a final boss. I don't know. I like a more concrete, boss that I can connect with. And Sin's just something else, So to me, the antagonists weren't as good. But overall, it was a super polished game. The combat was really fun. The world definitely grew on me. The characters definitely grew on me. So I put it at number 5.
I was super stoked for this fucking game. I've got my PS2. This was the first console I probably bought with my own money. I saved up for a PS2 so I could play Final Fantasy X. I beat this game in probably a week. Start to finish, beat it in a week. At the time, I loved it. looking back, it doesn't fare as well for me, but it's still really high. Like Joe said, the battle system, not only is it one of the best for me, it's definitely the best combat system out of all the Final Fantasies. Just the weaknesses, the fact that each character had a specific enemy that they were strong against, and the fact that you could switch them out meant that combat was very interesting. You know, you used every character and it made sense. It worked for the storyline. Close-knit cast again. The summons I actually really liked. I liked that you would summon them, they'd fight alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be Yuna though, right? Yuna and the summon.
Yes.
Yeah, and there was like a time limit.
Yep.
Yeah. That was cool. I didn't mind that. I found the actual designs, like I for some reason Ifrit sticks out as being like that's like the Ifrit that I would want.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. The voice acting does not hold up.
Just find Joe said the opposite.
I said I liked it.
Yeah, I think. I mean, maybe I've seen that laughing scene too many times, and it's warped my perception.
Yeah.
But at the time, having this game fully voice acted was a huge deal
for sure.
So like, I can't really fault it too much for that. The world is very colorful. Spira is a very peaceful place, seemingly, which makes sense because these summoners are continually sacrificing themselves to keep the peace. So it has a sort of tranquil, islandy kind of feeling to it. Obviously, VIII, encapsulates that. But to me, the world is very, very cheery, and I like that. And the cast is colorful. Some of the clothing, like the clothing designs, for me don't quite do it for me. Titus's whole look, his weird little shorts and stuff, like I don't know, like Lulu's cool, but she's a bit exaggerated, and like all the characters sort of feel a little bit kind of
Hearts like.
Yeah, this is sort of Nomura when he's getting into his weirder phase, I would say. Yuna's really good. I really like Yuna's character design, and I do really like and Riku. Really the female characters, I think I really like all of them a lot. Waka is annoying. Kamari, don't care about Kamari at all. Oron is cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
But it's also like, it's just weird. It's like he has this huge sword. He just uses one hand. What's wrong with his other arm? Does he ever use it?
Yeah, he does.
I don't even understand. He's always just standing.
He does when he limit breaks. One of his limits, I think.
Well, he's got this weird, like he's just holding it. To me, it always looks like his arm was in a sling or something to me. And it's just like little weird details like that kind of were strange. Seymour's weak villain. Sin's kind of cool, like the concept of Sin.
Yeah.
And it really being jacked in the end. That's kind of cool. But maybe doesn't age the best, but from a purely gameplay perspective, I love this game. And I ranked it 6th overall, and that was a tough one for me. And also, I was mentioning this to Alex earlier. 10-2's existence is probably why I ranked it 6th and not slightly higher, because I know I shouldn't really include that game in this ranking, but to me 10-2 is really cringy, and
I fucking love 10-2.
I do not like 10-2 at all, and to me it makes 10 worse. So I'll leave it at that.
9 times better.
So I ranked Final Fantasy X at 3rd. It's actually one of my favorite Final Fantasies. I love it.
Yeah.
Everything you said about the world, the characters, the setting, how it's very like watery and beachy and colorful. I really like that.
Yeah.
The combat, as we were saying, like I tend to use, like in Final Fantasy Tactics, I use my entire army.
Yeah.
I love having a vast array of characters at my disposal. So in this game where you're supposed to use all the characters constantly in combat, I love it. It's definitely my favorite combat system. The use of the different elements with all the different characters, like having Riku, who if there's a mech, you just run in and steal and they fall apart or whatever.
I love
like
that.
Just such cool little nuances to combat that really, really awesome.
Totally.
The overall story, like the fact that throughout the entire thing, Titus is talking about how like this is his story and all this stuff. And then at the end, you kind of find out this really isn't his story. He's really not the main character of this. Like he's actually like a dream. Like he's not even like a real person. I feel like is pretty pretty a cool little twist.
Yep.
We're really and truly like Yuna is the main character for this entire story. Like this is the whole FF10 kind of sequel, like the 2 games. It's about Yuna really. I think she's a really strong character. Like she has a lot of development. Obviously a lot in 10-2, maybe not for the best, but development.
Unnecessary.
I actually don't mind 10-2. It's not the best game ever, but it's not. But 10 is a great game, great story. To Xanarkand, one of the best songs in the series, in my opinion.
And that's actually the only one that's composed by Uematsu for this game. I believe,
really?
Because he didn't. This is the first game where he kind of stepped back,
right?
And I think he just did To Xanarkand.
It's a friggin' good song.
Makes sense because that is the standout title.
Yeah, good song.
I think we also need to mention Blitzball.
I loved Blitzball in 1.
Blitzball is awesome.
Yeah,
and you could create your Blitzball team, right?
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
Yep.
I spent so much time to it. Like basically, this was just you got a Final Fantasy game and a FIFA game all in one.
Oh God, not even close. I do not like Blitzball at all. I don't think I've ever scored a goal in Blitzball. I don't know how to do it. I can never figure it out. I beat the game twice. I don't understand Blitzball, and I'll never understand it. And I think it's too late for me to understand it. And yeah,
I was beating teams like 10-0 consistently.
Dude, I've never won a game of Blitzball. And
you just need to go. You needed to go because you could go recruit team members.
You could
from the world, which was cool.
That was probably my least favorite
You could get
part.
some sick players,
or
and then you could just stomp.
Just spam Jet Shot and Jet Shot 2.
Pretty much.
And just take out like
do
2
it from
defenders.
like the other side of the friggin' arena.
Yeah, insane. It's such a fun little mini game.
I spent at least 20 hours on Blitzball.
Me too, Joe. I played it a lot.
Yeah.
Great game, and it had a lot of end game content too, with getting all the weapons and because you need 2 pieces, I think, to like.
How do you guys feel about the
weapons.
Mega Sisters as the ultimate summon?
I don't know. They were cool.
Them.
Weird pick.
They were.
They're fucking strong though.
I do disagree with Joe about the summons. Like for me, the way I use them a lot. I use the summons a lot because to me it was a way that like, okay, like this boss has a ton of health, a ton of HP. So this kind of is just like a sub character to throw in front, soak up some damage, do some damage, move forward. My character's summon again until my summons are all gone, and then like
Yojimbo. Toss like Gil at him. And he can be OP as fuck.
Anima.
Yeah, Anima.
Oh
It's so weird.
Jeremy's
Yeah.
I love Anima.
but no, great game.
So I think I did use the summons, but again, I just didn't like that they replaced your party because then you're fighting with basically a punch. Like in a lot of cases, you'd end up using them, they'd die, so you'd throw another punching bag in, soak up damage, and die. Like I don't know.
I guess looking at it, might have been cooler if you summoned the summon stayed in, but Yuna and the rest of your party stayed in as well.
Sure,
maybe that would have been cooler.
Yeah,
but it would have been unbalanced then probably.
But yeah, great game. I like the story. I like that at the end you're like, oh crap, like I have to die.
Yeah,
me and or whatever happened. 2 people have to die, right? That's how it works. The summoner dies and one person becomes Sin. Sin.
And in doing that, he breaks the cycle basically.
Yeah, and then at the end they were like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah,
I like it. I thought it was a cool story. Love the game.
Yeah.
So that was my number 3. So next up, Final Fantasy 12, released in North America and Japan in 2006.
Yeah. Alex is looking at me. I guess that means he wants me to go.
Well, do you want me?
No, it's cool. I can start it off. So we were waiting a long time. You know, obviously 11 came out in I think 2002, but that was different. That was an MMO. Also, you know, it was just kind of a weird thing for Final Fantasy to do. I've always said that I wish, I guess just to talk about 11 for a minute here, I wish that 11 had just been Final Fantasy Online.
Yeah, me too.
And I find that it was part of the main franchise. It was always weird to me because it just seems like so fundamentally different.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that they had just called it that and then that 12 had been 11. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that's doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We waited a long time for a single player Final Fantasy. At the time, we're used to waiting a lot longer now, unfortunately. 12 came out in 2006, one of the late era PS2 games. It must have came out literally like a month before PS3 came out. This is the very tail end because PS3 came out in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
I remember actually, we were in grade 12.
Yep.
Came out on Halloween, October 31st, if I'm correct, or very close to that time. I think I've been pretty consistent in my like of this game ever since it came out.
Yeah, you have.
I've always liked this game.
Yeah.
It's set in Ivalice. Final Fantasy Tactics is my favorite Final Fantasy game. 9 is my favorite for this ranking for main series, but Tactics is my favorite. So right off the bat, Ivalice setting helps it a lot in my opinion. I love the openness of the world. I love that it is basically an offline MMO, which is exactly what I want because I like that kind of gameplay, but I don't necessarily like the persistent world that comes with the MMO. I love that you could program your AI to do exactly what you wanted in any given situation.
Mm-hmm.
I found it was just really fun. I honestly even took it to the next level, and even my main character, I had him programmed as well. So I would just run up to a mob and they would just destroy them. And it was just so relaxing. The world, I like the story. So the story gets a lot of hate, but I like that it's more down to earth. It's not really about saving the world. It's more of a low key political story.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. It's a nice change of pace. This game was also developed for the first half of it, at least. The director was Yasumi Matsuno.
Yeah.
The director of Final Fantasy Tactics and Ogre Battle, Tactics Ogre, Vagrant Story, some really, really cool games and unique games. Troubled development cycle. He was taken off about halfway through. I think he originally wanted Bosch to be the main character, but Square Enix, and this was also the first game I think that was solely Square Enix after they merged. So there was a lot of going on at the company at the time. They wanted a more, typical Final Fantasy hero, the more sort of, like Squall. Like he's not very manly. He's kind of what's the word?
Brooding.
He's just more androgynous. That's the word I'm looking for.
You're looking for.
They're looking for more of a pretty boy.
Yeah.
Bosch would have been a really cool main character.
Well, he actually ties more to. I feel like I guess he is more manly looking, but personality wise, he's more similar to like Cloud and Squall then.
Exactly.
But Titus and Zidane are more similar to Vaughn.
Yeah, that might be true. And so Vaughn was basically there as. So I think a lot of the game's hate comes from Vaughn. He's not really 100%. Supposed to be there and he's not really the main character. If you really play that game, he's not the main character. He's sort of observing all this
the
going
eyes
on.
that we see it.
Yeah, like
type thing.
it's really Ash and Vaughn and Balthier. They're the main driving forces behind it, and I like that. You don't even have to use Vaughn in your party. I don't think.
I use them all, but
yeah, my main See, I will always pick like a main party. I use Vaughn, Ash, and Pinello in my second playthrough. My first playthrough, I can't remember who I used, but I just really like this game. The graphics hold up tremendously well.
Mm-hmm.
This is a late PS2 game. This could easily be a PS. This looks better than many PS3 launch titles.
Wow.
Yeah. The Zodiac Age, the remake, which I have not played.
Yeah.
I would like to. I think it fixed a lot of the issues that people had with the license board.
Yeah.
The license board was lacking. I will say that it was lacking. Every character essentially became the same thing, but at the same time, you could kind of say that for many Final Fantasies. You could say that for 7. You could say that essentially, if you switch the material from one character to the other, they're essentially the same character.
Mm-hmm.
And same with 8, and 10 with the sphere grid. If you level them up enough, everyone learns everything. But yeah, so the license board was lacking, but really, I really just love the gameplay in this. I just really enjoyed it. I love grinding. I love chaining monsters together to get better loot, and the openness of those, the different areas. Like it wasn't an open world game, but it was very, very close to it. I usually don't like when RPGs start off in sand areas. They're usually my least favorite.
I do.
Deserts. But in this game, I really like it. For some reason, it works for me. Rabanastre is cool. There's a lot of cool, like, what's the woods you go to? The Feywood. Very cool location. I think this is a misunderstood game.
Sure.
And I think more people need to replay it. And I think today, from today's lens, it will hold up a lot better than people remember it. I think if you guys play through it again, you will like it a lot more. I really believe that. But for me, I rank this game as 4th, actually, which is controversial, I know.
Really high. Yeah.
But I really, really like this game, and I've always liked it. It was hard for me to pick between 10 and 12. I know I had 5. I had 5 actually as my 5th, but it was tough for me, really. To those 3 rankings actually were tough for me, but good game.
All right, so for me, I feel like you're right, Jeremy. I do need to go and replay this game, but because to me this game was the beginning of the downfall of Square. So
wow,
Enix comes in, they merge. This is where the game quality just started to depart from what I think of when I think of Final Fantasy games. 10 arguably was different, but this is when I really started to get concerned. So first, I'll start kind of with, but it wasn't unredeemable. You know, this game came out and I was like, it's a weaker entry in the series. But I'll start with what's good. I agree that the gameplay was fun, the combat was fun, chaining monsters together was a lot of fun. So that's the good, and I give it some credit for that. But other than that, I found that, you know, the world should be cool, and I was really excited about the world, but I felt like the world was just presented in a forgettable way. I felt like the world didn't really feel alive like I wanted a world to feel. Part of that is I don't think it has much for cities, and in the cities you can't really go into places very much. So to me, like I like, for example, you go back to 9, 8, 7. If there's a door, oftentimes you can go in that door and you can look around and you can say hi to whoever's in there and you get some loot. 12, you know, if there's a door, it's just part of the scenery. So I didn't like that. I found that the world wasn't truly open world. And again, this is when I was still expecting that. And I had hope that Final Fantasy was going to deliver more of the traditional open world style, where like my dream is still give me an airship and let me, you know, float across the world as I see fit. I understand it's challenging, and I think my expectations after this game kind of adjusted, but it was still at this point a bit of a disappointment in that regard. And then the last thing is, to me, the cast is a bit forgettable too. I think it's Bash, right? Mm-hmm. I think he was probably the best character in the game, but for me, the rest of the characters and the story was just kind of forgettable.
You don't like Balthier? Balthier is super memorable.
Yeah, Balthier. I think Balthier is who I'm thinking about.
Okay.
Yeah, Balthier is who I'm thinking.
He has the gun. He's the one with the gun.
He was my favorite. Yeah, he's my favorite.
Sky Pirate.
Yeah, Sky Pirate. That's what I mean. So Sky Pirate was my favorite. So yeah, again, if I go back and play this with expectations I have now versus when I played it then and the expectations I had then, I would probably enjoy it more. But I tried to be at least somewhat objective. I did put it in 8th place. If you had asked me right after I played it, I probably would have ranked it even lower. But I'll give it some credit. It had some fun combat. So number 8 for me.
So I also ranked it at 8th. So I love Ivalice as well. I love Tactics. I feel like playing through Tactics Advance and Tactics Advance 2 and seeing these races and being familiar with them in the setting definitely helps. I agree that I honestly agree that I think the issue is Vaughn and Pinello for me. If you just look at Balthier, is it Fran? Is that her name?
Fran.
Yeah, Balthier, Fran, Bosch, and Ash. I think they're all strong characters. All 4 of them are really strong. But Vaughn and Pinello just aren't. And I feel like because there's such a focus on them, and so it's like a child aspect, that it does kind of taint it a little bit. I, at the time, remember it feeling like a drag, and I think it's because of what you kind of commented on, is that this felt like an MMO without being an MMO. And that's where we've always differed, where I also like MMOs, but I've played MMOs. During this time, I was
whereas my experience with MMOs is very limited.
I was playing RO and getting into WoW. So like I was playing MMOs, I was doing the grind, I was seeing these open worlds, and then this single player game isn't where I wanted to experience that. So I maybe it was that kind of conflict at the time. I do really want to replay it. Thinking back, I do have fond feelings for it. My biggest issue probably also was the license board, in that it wasn't so much that you could max out. It was that because of how the license board worked, you could know where the best things were, make a path directly to it very quickly with all the characters. And in that sense, you just kind of skipped a big portion of it. And while that's true that like in the sphere grid you could do it, it was the resources that you got through the game where I feel like you could get all the best pieces and gear and crap on the license board within a normal playthrough, and you couldn't do that with the sphere grid. With the sphere grid, you would have to grind to fill that out. But you didn't have to do that in this game. And I felt like every character just felt so generic and the same playstyle wise. But that's fixed in the Zodiac Age where you pick like a specialization. So I hope if I do get a chance to replay it, that'll change things for me. But no, those 4 characters were cool. The combat was cool. The gambits were cool. The fact that you could press start and switch your characters out too was fun for me because I get to use the entire cast as I like doing. Good game. Some different things. Rabanastre or whatever is cool. This big city, the setting. I don't even remember the story that much. I remember feeling very Star Warsy. Is that a thing? That's what it keeps. Yeah. I don't know.
There's an evil empire.
Yeah. The judges were cool. The
judges
were really
are cool as fuck. That's true.
Yeah.
Judge Gabranth or whatever.
Yeah.
Who's Bosch's twin, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool.
Sick.
That's one of the sickest designs.
The judges were awesome.
Yeah, the judges are really cool.
But yeah.
I agree. Judges are pretty awesome.
I ranked it 8th. All right. 13 came out in 2009 in Japan and 2010 in North America. Who wants to start with this?
I'll start it because I'll, fuck this game. That's all I want to say. Joe, you go.
Oh my God. Fuck. So this game's absolute fucking travesty. It's terrible. It is the game that shook my faith in Square Enix to an almost unredeemable level. It's an absolute linear piece of crap. Complete disappointment. So now that's my rant. I'll say I know people like this game, and
who?
There's people.
Do you know
I don't
them?
know who they are, but there's also people who vote for Donald Trump too. So I don't know who these people are, but they're out there. Anyways, no. To be fair, it's all. I think this is a game you go in with expectations. If you go in with any kind of expectations of a Final Fantasy game, then you're probably going to be disappointed. If you've played a lot of, Darksiders or Bayonetta recently, maybe you go and you love this game. But I was expecting a Final Fantasy game, and that's not what I got. So I could not have been more disappointed. I would not classify this, other than title, as a Final Fantasy game. I'll say it had some cool, flashy-looking characters. If I was to pick out a positive, I didn't have any problem with the combat itself, but it was definitely the linearity of the game just killed it. So to me, worst Final Fantasy game ever made, and hopefully the worst Final Fantasy game that will ever be made. So yeah, 13th for me.
Okay, I'm going to say one little thing because I kind of skipped over it. I ranked it 12th. I actually like 2 less. But I don't even know anymore.
You ranked it. Dude.
What did I rank it?
You ranked it 11th. You had the highest ranking out of all 3 of us.
Oh my God. That's
You're
crazy.
one of those people, Jared.
No, man, I don't even know what I was thinking, dude. Like, honestly, I don't even know.
Well, we can discuss this more.
I think I ranked it a little higher just because, like, it is graphically good. Like, fuck, man, I don't even know. I fucking hate this game.
We'll
I fucking
think
hate
about
this game
more when we
Lightning's
when we get
cool.
to adjusting.
Lightning's the only reason. I like Lightning.
Okay, sure.
as a character. She's cool.
Yeah.
She's a very sick design.
Do you know why she's a sick design?
Because she's a female cloud. Yes. The battle music is all right, but
Yeah.
it takes a minute to get to the good part.
Mhm.
The battle system, I don't even like it, honestly. I don't even like it. It's, you're switching between these roles. They're like, what is it, like Ravager and like different. What the
Yeah.
fuck are these names? Why couldn't it be Warrior?
Yeah.
What the fuck are
It's
you
like
doing?
Commando or something.
Commando.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyways, I don't know. When we get to the overall ranking, we can bin this one. We can throw it at the fucking bottom for all I care. Anyways.
So I ranked it 12th. I feel like I don't hate it with as much passion as you guys. The characters aren't good. Like Lightning is okay. Snow is all right, but then he takes a turn in Lightning Returns. I haven't beat Lightning Returns yet, but I did beat 13-2.
That just shows how much.
I'm gonna beat Lightning Returns at some point.
Yeah.
But like, God, what's her name? Fang and something. I don't know. They were
Hope?
not great. Hope was not great.
Annoying.
Yeah, it just was. The characters are not relatable, really.
Saz sucks.
Saz, yeah, he's the other one. I didn't mind the combat system, but again, the character customization development is very linear. You just level up Commando or Ravager, Sentinel, or whatever the heck they're called. There weren't a lot of common like Final Fantasy elements that were focused on, like
The monster designs too.
Yeah,
They didn't look anything like.
it was a big departure from the series for sure, and it was very, very linear until you get to, I don't know, these big grasslands at the end. It opens up a little bit, but even then it doesn't really, like, there's not that much going on. You can grind out your ultimate weapons and do some quests and stuff, but like it's not and even the story, it was presented in a very confusing way that nobody knew what was going on with the Lassie, the Fal'Cie.
What the fuck is a Lassie?
Cocoon.
What is a Fal'Cie? Cocoon's the planet that's above the big planet.
This is the problem, is that they don't explain how did the people get on that planet, like what's going on. And this is when you play Type 0, if you do, which you won't.
I've played it. I fucking hate that game too.
And then you like, if you look at the stories of all these games, this weird Fabulos Crystallis or whatever they're called,
Even that name.
I know.
Like, we should have known.
I know. If you actually like read about the lore, it's like kind of cool.
But it's told in such a
you don't know until the whole like 5 games are done, and then you have to read on a wiki because it wasn't presented in any like way to actually consume it. It's like a cool story, but it's just done in such a shitty way that whatever they thought on paper that this whole collection of games was going to be did not turn out right. All of them are not good. People say 13-2 is good. It's not any better. It's not.
You know what the best game of the bunch of the fabulous fucking whatever the hell it's called?
What?
15.
Wow.
It's essentially but Noctis was part of Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah,
it's so weird.
Technically,
it's
but
so weird.
They ripped him out of the lore. Like,
I get it, but it's weird that they were so fucking. They were so convinced that this was going to be awesome that even by 15 they were still holding on to a part of this weird concept that just sucked.
It's insane.
I remember when these were first announced, like we were hyped. It looked sick. Versus 13 looked awesome.
This is that echo chamber, right? I feel like you get. I mean, this could be us right now doing exactly what we're doing, but you get talking to the people around you and you think what you're doing is okay.
Yeah.
And then you get lost in it, right? You just get lost in this concept that's not right.
Yeah.
So yeah, number 12 for me. Not a great game, not a fantastic game. Wouldn't really recommend it to anybody. Guy at work likes Final Fantasy and he likes 13. It's like,
so he doesn't actually like Final Fantasy.
I think he's gone.
I
think he's gone back and played some of the other ones, but this was the game that he got hooked on, and he likes it. And I'm like, I
can understand that
if it's your first game, then
I can understand that.
Yeah, if you don't have expectations, maybe. But
what would make you after playing this, be like, I really like this series. Like, this is I'm going to go back and replay all of them after playing Final Fantasy 13.
I don't know. I think you'd be disappointed in the other direction because you'd be like, well, why is there an open world? Why is this actually an RPG game and not? Like,
that's some better timeline shit right there.
And going and playing Bayonetta. Because here's the thing. Bayonetta games are great. I like them for what they are because they're what I expect them to be. And I would make this, like this you change some character names, put Bayonetta in this world, and it's a Bayonetta game.
Yeah.
Poor Bayonetta.
I like Bayonetta.
I know, but even using it in the same breath as this fucking game is.
I heard that Lightning Returns has a really good combat system, though. So we'll see. When
I played the demo of 13.2 and I was disgusted.
Yeah, it's the same. It's very similar.
Disgusted.
It's a bit more flexible and open.
Yeah.
In terms of where you can traverse, but it's still very similar. 13.3 Lightning Returns or whatever. I will let you know. I'll give you an update when
you let me know, Alex.
In 5 years when I get around to it. All right. So last on the list. Final Fantasy 15, aka Final Fantasy 13 versus.
Oh my god.
Okay, who wants to start? Came out in 2016 for both North America and Japan. I think you
start,
said.
and we'll go. You can end it on a positive
sure.
note, Alex.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so 15. Honestly, I've talked a lot of shit about this game.
We have had many long discussions.
We've had lots of lots of long discussions. We've all weighed in on how we feel about this game. I've kind of come around to it a bit. Basically, I think it's a good game. But the story, I hate the story. I hate the pacing of the story. I find there's no context for a lot of what happens. So all these emotional moments, really, they don't pay off. And it's really just my issue with the storytelling. Final Fantasy games should have an at least coherent story. Coming off of 13, I don't think this story is any better than 13's, really.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
But that being said, the gameplay is much better. The world is much better. Mm-hmm. The characters, Noctis is cool. I'm not really crazy about the other three guys, though.
Really?
So, like, there's that. But the actual exploring was fun. Like, the side quests were kind of fun, even though they're kind of generic JRPG fetch quests for the most part.
Yeah.
After playing something like The Witcher, you kind of have a different expectation for what you think side quests can and should be.
Sure.
So a lot of it was me comparing it to other open world games at the time. Mm-hmm. But it's fun. It's fun. It's like I like that you could listen to the old music and stuff like that. That was cool, but also I felt like they needed to put that in just to make it a little bit better. But there's a lot of good things about the game. I like the day and night cycle. I like how when it gets dark, the fucking scary monsters come out.
Right.
Some of those caverns that you explore are really intense.
The goblins and stuff.
Yeah, the goblins and shit, they fucking freak me out, man. And so there's a good game there.
Yeah.
Forgetting the story, if there was a mode that you could play just like don't even do the story, just like open world, just explore and do the side quests, I would like that game way more.
Right.
I don't even need a story for this game because I just think it would be better for me. I just really like, okay, the key part is when, who's that old dude who dies? And there's like, oh, he's dead.
Yeah.
And you're like, who the fuck is this guy? I met this guy once. Why do I care?
Yeah.
That's just like, that sums it up, the story. It's just like, it's hard for me to care about the story. Why was the first part of the game a movie? That would have been a great opening, maybe. But they made it as a fucking movie. I watched that movie, man. I don't know what the fuck happened.
The opening was a movie. The opening movie was part of the game.
Yeah. And that's Square Enix's greed coming in.
I know.
Or something.
Yeah.
So this game has problems, but I would still say, it's a step in the right direction coming off of 13. It's a step in the right direction. And especially if you look at Final Fantasy 14, just to give 14 a shout out, the launch of the original 14 was horrendous.
Yeah.
So, them fixing 14 with Realm Reborn and then 15 coming out, it is definitely a step in the right direction. Yeah. I'll give it that. I don't hate this game. I got the platinum for this game. But I wouldn't touch any of the DLCs or anything like that. Like, I'm not interested in the story. And I think they just need to move on from it and take what they've learned. If they want to do another open world Final Fantasy, take what they've learned and try to come up with a somewhat coherent storyline. I rank this 10th.
All right. So for me, I loved the return in this game to a more open world. So it's still not what I would have wanted us to come back to, in terms of, you know, 7, 8, 9 having the big overworld. But I think this is like a compromise in terms of an open world that I could digest. That being said, I wish there was more in that open world. Like, they made it big, but it kind of just at times areas feel stretched out and there's just not much there. I love driving around the regalia. Just kind of felt the first half of the game kind of felt like kind of a fun, laid back adventure with just a bunch of friends. So that part really appealed to me. And generally, I just had a lot of fun playing it in the first half. The combat, I would say Final Fantasy 15 combat is probably my favorite combat in the Final Fantasy game. So that's a huge plus on its side for me, is that the gameplay is fun. The first half of the game is fun. I agree that the story was not well told and it had pacing issues. I think it had a lot of potential to be a great story if they had told it well.
Yep.
So I think it could have been one of the best Final Fantasy stories if it was actually told well. I liked the movie, and the parts of this that I did understand, I liked. But again, they did not get you invested enough into the story and into some of the characters, like you said, before killing someone off. So I don't know what was going on. I think it all just comes down to the game being kind of incomplete. So, yeah, first half of the game to me is really awesome. It then kind of proceeded to shit the bed in the second half. So the second half of the game is just incomplete. I really don't have much to say about the second half because I don't really think it's even worthy of being judged, because they just tried to ship something and make that half of the game kind of almost unfinished to a point that it's disrespectful to the fans. So unlike other games, though, where, you know, I obviously didn't like 13 and not a huge fan of 12, I would put what I didn't like in those games more on the developers and what they chose in terms of direction of the game. The only thing that I can think for 15 is that this was not a developer issue as much as it was an executive issue pushing out a game that wasn't ready to be pushed out. So here I would give a break almost to the people making the game and really put the blame on the executives at Square Enix on the business side of things, really interfering and preventing a great game from being made. So yeah, I ranked this one as number 7. Now I'll say there's actually for me there's a huge gap between my sixth ranked game, which was Final Fantasy IV, and this one. So there's a huge drop off. I would even go so far as to say that even if the second half of this game was completed, I think it would still probably rank 7th. I still don't think even completing the second half would be enough. If they had managed to actually properly tell the story, then it probably had potential to be higher. But yeah, huge drop off in the quality. So really, I kind of have my games grouped. I have the top 6 games. I have kind of the next 3, which were 15 and 5 and 12. And then another drop off for Final Fantasy 3, 2, 1, and then a fucking gargantuan drop off to 13 because it's fucking terrible. So anyway,
so
number 7 for 15.
In what you said too, like I guess I'd like to clarify too. Like for me, it would be my top 9 are all great.
Mm-hmm.
15 is good, and then the bottom 3 are all not great for me.
Right.
And 13 and 2 being really bad. Yeah.
So I ranked this 6th, the highest of any of us. Mm-hmm. Me and you, as you said, we've kind of debated this game a lot over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
I really like this game, but I don't disagree with a lot of what was said. I think what Joe really nailed it in that the first half of this game, the portion of the game that is the first half of Noctis and the boys on the road going around, great. I think they really expand everything out. We start to see character development. We start to see get used to these environments, and then it kind of quickly finishes up. Like it's very fast the last couple beats. In the beginning, it starts off kind of in the middle of things already happening. So I think, like you guys were saying, it's corporate greed, and like I don't know if we'll ever know what happened, but versus if you can see the trailer online, they had the invasion that was done. That was the beginning. Like there was like a demo, I think, or like a big long trailer of the invasion of the Niflheim force, whatever they're called. Is it Niflheim? I think so. Whatever, Niflgaard. I don't know, whatever they're called. Like when they invade Noctis's place, Lucius or Kingdom, or I don't know what's called.
Is it?
It
might be Lucius.
Yeah, when they invade the kingdom. Anyway, that was a thing. So it felt like there was supposed to be so much more. You know, it felt like when you loaded up the regalia onto that boat to go to that like water-based kingdom where Leviathan was, it felt like you were supposed to get regalia back somewhere. Like there was gonna be more driving around. When you went to, again, Niflgaard or Heim or whatever it was called, and Luna Freya's kingdom, it felt like Tenebrae or something like that.
Yeah.
It felt like you were going to go journey around there. And they didn't
people
finish.
Find a continent? They found that there is the continent in the game that they just didn't use.
Exactly. It felt like there were bigger plans. And that's kind of where the story felt like it was going, and it never got there. And they just quickly rushed. Yeah. The story I thought was cool. I really like the characters. I really like, you were talking before how you really like a close-knit cast. I feel like it didn't get any more close-knit than this group.
It's true.
And like
they're all kind of the same.
But like I thought that again,
or maybe they were more, for me, they were more like, they were all kind of cliche. They were all like, they had character types.
Sure.
And they stuck very closely to that.
But I felt like, and the reason for this was, as you guys said, but they had the animated shorts where they went through each of these guys to kind of give them more development.
I think the animated shorts were probably the best storytelling of the entire game.
Yeah, and I felt like they knew very well that they needed that to fill in these characters because they didn't do it in game, because it felt rushed, because something went wrong where Nomura had a different plan. He developed a different game. They didn't want it. Tabata came in, tried to fix it, didn't have enough time to fix it.
Props to Tabata just for getting this game out.
But we will never know like how much of this was versus that just got switched. You know, how much what the hell happened here? But I really like this game. The combat's awesome. The story is really cool. The music is cool. I really like the overall vibe of the game is really cool.
Definitely.
It just did feel like it wasn't complete.
Fishing. The fishing is awesome. Great gameplay system for the fishing. I'm not joking.
Okay.
Yeah, it was good.
And I guess you see this right now in even Nomura. I don't know how he's feeling, but the fact that he is bringing Yozora into Kingdom Hearts, and that little trailer we had where he had essentially the 15 characters in this world, because he's giving them to Disney. He's saying, Square Enix, I don't care what you're doing. I'm going to take these characters that I've kind of developed, put them in a Disney game, giving that license to Disney, which will allow me to continue to develop that world for them. And you can't say anything about it.
Yeah, and look at Kingdom Hearts 3. That is a polished game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Kingdom Hearts storyline, so yes, it is confusing by nature, but he can make a game.
Nomura hasn't really messed anything else up. Like, that's the weird thing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and that's why I don't think it was necessarily Nomura's fault, or maybe he just had one. I think it was just the production, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Things were not coming together. People weren't on the same page.
Yeah.
And
they've reached a point where they had to push something out.
Yeah, exactly.
And they did. So,
and it was this game, like Final Fantasy 13 came out in 2009, but Fit versus 13 was announced probably 10 years before 15 came out.
Yeah.
It was getting into vaporware territory.
Yeah.
And,
and that's why
they just had to get it out, I think.
Joe's whole thing of you really have to judge it based on kind of the central game where pre-time skip. And that's what I'm basing my score on, where I put it at 6th. Because I think that part of the game is good.
Yeah.
And that completes our ranking. So now we will move on to our preliminary rankings.
Yeah, so just to explain to the audience, we're going to run through our preliminary list. This is all of our combined rankings. I guess, Joe, can you maybe give us some insight into how this is determined? Is it literally just an average or what?
Yeah, so really all I did was average up what we ranked individually the games to be, and then based on whatever the average was, I ranked that. So they're kind of ranked in terms of our average ranking.
Cool. So we're going to run through that list, and then we're going to have a little debate, see if there's anything we want to kind of push up as a group for our overall group ranking. And then after that, once we're, relatively satisfied, all of us, we will go through the final ranking.
Followed by a little bonus round.
A little bonus round afterwards.
Which we'll keep that a little secret for now.
Little secret.
So from 13th spot to first, we will begin with Final Fantasy II at number 13. Number 12, Final Fantasy 13. Number 11, Final Fantasy 1. Number 10, top 10, it's Final Fantasy 3. Number 9, Final Fantasy 5. Pretty low for you, Jeremy.
Pretty low.
Number 8, Final Fantasy 15. Number 7, Final Fantasy 4. Number 6, Final Fantasy 12. Number 5, Final Fantasy 10. Number 4 is Final Fantasy 6. Number 3 is Final Fantasy 9. Number 2 is Final Fantasy 8. And number 1 is Final Fantasy 7. Did I miss anything there, guys? I may have. Sweet God.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you got them all.
All right.
Jeremy, you can add a drum roll in later.
Okay, we'll do. The drum set in the other room, actually.
There you go.
So yeah, that's our preliminary listing. But now for the debate.
Yeah. So, starting off, is there anything? I guess we'll kick it to you, Joe. Is there anything that stands out to you that you would like to see moved up or down?
Okay, so I'm probably the one in most agreement with this preliminary ranking. I think, of the preliminary ranking, my picks match. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all exactly what I have them ranked as. And then I've got Final Fantasy 4 switched with Final Fantasy 15. So if I was to pick, I guess, one thing, because again, I said I think there's a big drop off between Final Fantasy 15 and Final Fantasy 4 and Final Fantasy 15. But you guys kind of have it the other way. You've got Final Fantasy 15 being better than 4. So to me,
I have 15 being worse than 4.
Right. So I guess it's mainly you, Alex, that has Final Fantasy 15 being better than 4, right?
Right.
Although I guess we're really not that far off.
No.
Yeah. So I guess then the only thing I can argue really that I'm not completely in agreement with is 12. So 12 I have ranked 8th. Jeremy, you have it ranked as high as 4th. Me and Alex, I guess, both kind of disagree with you on that. And it came out to an average of 6. So I would put it behind 15 for sure. And I'd put it behind even 4.
Okay, that could be good.
I would drop it to I would drop it to 8th.
That could be a good bargaining chip in the future.
In the future.
So again, like Final Fantasy 12 to me was just this. I think I do need to play it again, so I'll give you that. But I think it's just a case of it was disappointing for what it was. Like it was not what I wanted, the direction that I wanted Final Fantasy to go in after 10. So
Fair
yeah,
enough.
so
I say we'll just kind of lay out what we want out of this, and then we'll take it from there. So Alex, is there anything you immediately would want to change?
Yeah, I want 6 higher.
You want 6 higher?
Yeah, that's pretty much my only issue with this list is I think 6 should be up. It's currently
Actually, I will.
fourth.
Sorry, I'll also say I want 13 demoted to last
Done.
place.
Well, actually, me and
Sorry,
Alex were
Alex,
kind of
were you
talking about
done?
this. We might have to discuss that more.
Yeah.
2 and
Okay.
13 being the last. They're definitely the two worst, though.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing. So you want 6 higher.
Yep.
This might be weird, Joe and Alex, coming from me, but we have Final Fantasy VIII as number 2.
Yeah, that's high.
I think it's too high. I know I had it my third place ranking, but for me, the game is too unbalanced and too broken in a lot of ways that if you were really being objective about it, I don't think it should be second place.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for me, I would obviously switch 9 with 8, but I'm happy with 9 being third. And honestly, I would be cool with switching 8 to maybe fourth or lower. I don't really care where 8 falls, to be honest, for another game. So I would have 8 lower, even though I love it.
So why don't you? So you could just say you want to bring 8 down 2 places or something, or you want so you want 9 in second, like bump up 9.
Well, yeah. Well, I did say that I'd be happy with 9 also being third. I'd be happy with another game as long as there's a few games that I could see, and games that I necessarily don't even think for me are as good, but I think as a whole and like listen to your guys' opinions on it, like I can see why it should be higher.
We could
So you're
just
thinking 6.
we could just bump 8.
Where
below
was 6? What was 6 ranked for us?
fourth?
Okay, so
we
that
could
makes a lot
go
of sense.
7, 9, 6, 8.
7, 9, 6, 8. I would be okay with that. What do you think about that, Joe?
No.
Would you be okay with moving 8 down 1 spot? Just so to second.
Even that's tough for me. See, the thing with 8.
What if
I
we
don't
give
know,
you 13
I
as
feel like
bottom?
Oh, come on. You want 13 at the bottom anyway.
No,
don't
I
you?
want 2 at the bottom.
No, you don't. You're saying that now.
No,
to
me and Alex
bargain.
were talking.
Yeah.
We have it on tape. You can hear our fucking debate.
You're trying to extort me. That's what you're trying to do. It's fucking extortion. No, I just want to say, I think
defend 8 for
is
second.
extremely underrated. I think the characters in 8 are extremely underrated. I think they were well developed, and the thing that drives 8 to second for me is that it has like so much emotional poignancy compared to even a lot of the other games in the series. I don't know what it is, but the emotional moments just feel a lot stronger in 8. And I don't know if it was because they went to the more realistic graphics relative to 7 and relative to 9. But yeah,
Squall on his melting face.
8 is 100% number 2 for me.
Okay.
That being said, I can't be unreasonable here. So we want to move. Here's what I would agree to. I would agree to 1 being 7, 2 being 6, 3 being 9, or no. Yeah, shit.
So,
I should have said 3 being 8 and 4 being 9. So 1, 6, 8, 9.
So I really want 9 above 8. How about if we do 7
But
as
Alex,
first?
you must be in agreement on this one.
7
right?
as first. I think this will work for Alex. 7 as first.
Yeah.
6 as second.
Okay.
9 as third. 8 as fourth. And then you guys can put 12 wherever the fuck you want. You can put it lower. Because what is it on ours? 6th? Or what is it overall for us? Yeah, 12
It's
is
6,
6.
yeah.
You guys can put it wherever you want outside of the bottom 3. So 1, 2, and 13. It has to be in the top 10.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you guys can put it where you see fit. I'd be happy with that top 4 ranking, even though 6. So you got to keep in mind, I put 6. 6 was what was it?
That's true.
6 was 7th for me.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big jump for me from, what was it, 4th to 2nd? Yeah.
Okay.
And really the only, I love 8. I like 8 a lot more than 6. But just for me, I just have to look at objectively for this specific game. It is too unbalanced.
Yeah.
So Alex, what are you thinking?
Oh Jesus, both of you guys kind of put my game where I wanted it to go. So
Yeah, you don't have to do anything.
I'm good with either, really. I guess, Joe, do you accept Jeremy's proposal to keep 8 at 4th, but be able to move 12 around to promote something else up?
And then we can discuss 13 and 2 at the end. We'll figure that out.
I mean, 4th is definitely a lot lower than I think 8 deserves to be. But if I think about in terms of like objectively where most people would put 8, then I think I'd be okay with it in 4th.
That's
probably
8. That's so high. I think for like, if you looked at, if you took a survey of 100 people,
8's.
That would be pretty high for 8.
Yeah.
But I think it's still representative of our group and our love for 8. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay. So then 7, 6, 9, 8, and then move.
What's our 5th?
Move
10.
10. I'm happy
10,
with that.
Yeah, 10 can stay there. And then
what's 6th place?
6th is
12.
12. So then move 12th down to 8th place.
I can accept that.
From 6th to 8th.
Also, my boy FF5, I'm not going to push for it.
And
I've said my piece.
The only way I'll agree to this is if we also move 13 into last place.
Yeah. So me and Alex were talking a little bit. We took a little break, and I think what did we come up with? We said 2 was probably less fun to play overall, but we were less disappointed with it because we didn't have expectations.
Yeah.
And clearly they were trying to make something.
Yeah.
Whereas 13, I think we came to the conclusion that it feels like 13 was made in a boardroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can accept 13 being last, honestly.
Sure. Yep.
All right. So we're all in agreement on that then?
So it's okay. So we got 6. What's 6th place now?
So 6th place would now be Final Fantasy IV, which is I think that's fair for that, yeah. And then 7th place would now be 15. So like middle of the pack, yeah. So here's one thing you haven't argued, Jeremy, is you haven't said anything about Final Fantasy V.
Well, I did say one thing. I said I'm not going to argue for it because, like, I mean, do you want me to argue for it? Because I would like it to be a little bit higher, but I just need to kind of look at this list here. So we have.
If you could give a convincing argument for
okay,
being
I can.
higher, then I could potentially budge on that.
Okay, well, great. So what was our 7th place?
7th now is 15.
Ooh. Damn. What was it before though? 8. Okay.
It was 8th, so it's moving up 1 spot.
And 5 is 9th. So what's our new 8th?
So our new 8th is 12.
12. I would have 5 above 12. We can move 12 down further if you guys want.
Would you have it above 15?
Okay.
No, we can have 5 at 8. 12 is 9. 10 for 3 or whatever.
I would probably be prepared to go as high as for 5. I'd be prepared to bring it up actually to
I would have it above 15 obviously for me.
I would do that.
I will say this, it's a pure Final Fantasy. You can't really say anything bad about this game. It might not stand out the most, but there's nothing wrong with this game. There's no glaring problems with this game.
No.
Sure. And like those jobs, man, the job system alone, what can you really say bad about this game other than, it's kind of old.
So you want 5 above 12 and 15, or 12 and then 15.
And 15 was at 8 originally. So really this would just be no moving for 8.
Yeah.
And it would be 7. So am I correct in saying that 5 would be 7th?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we'd have 15 and then we'd have
12.
12 as 9th. I'm okay with that because that's going down from 6 to 9th.
I'm cool with that.
Which is more in line with your guys' opinion, but that's fine because that's bumping 5 up, which honestly, it was really tight for me for 5 and 12. And I would love to get 5 some love because I feel like it is misunderstood, kind of forgotten Final Fantasy. So I'd be cool with that. And then like 3, I really like 3. but I'm fine with it being in 10th spot. I have no issues about 3.
No. All right. So after a heated debate, we have our final ranking. Starting in 13th, we have Final Fantasy 13. 12th, we have Final Fantasy 2. In 11th place, we have Final Fantasy 1, or just Final Fantasy. In 10th place, we have Final Fantasy 3. At 9th, we have Final Fantasy 12. At 8th, we have Final Fantasy 15. At 7th place, we have Final Fantasy 5. At 6th, we have Final Fantasy 4. Starting top 5. At 5th, Final Fantasy 10. In 4th place, we have Final Fantasy 8. 3rd, we have Final Fantasy 9. At 2nd place, a nice bump up, we have Final Fantasy 6. Well deserved. And 1st place, Final Fantasy 7.
Surprise to no one.
Yeah. So that was our final rankings here. Please let us know in the comments if you guys agree, if there's any changes you guys would make, what your list would be. So now we'll kind of just run through. Do you guys have anything you want to say about the list? Is there anything? Does it feel right? Does it feel right?
It feels right. I think it's a good, I think we've weighed our own personal, feelings about the games versus each other's. And I think we've come up with a nice little list here. And I think we were very civil in our debate. I wouldn't say it was heated at all. I'd say we were all pretty, we had things we wanted to accomplish. We negotiated.
Yeah, I agree.
If politics worked this way, maybe things would get done.
Yeah. No.
But unfortunately, we're in the dark timelines. So,
well,
we don't need to get into that though.
Not
tonight. I think the politics you're talking about is the politics on me.
Yeah.
But you know what? I feel like I'm the winner here, because as of yesterday, I actually had Final Fantasy VI at number 2, and I had Final Fantasy VIII ranked lower. And to be honest, between 6, 8, 9, they're all very close for me. Like, they're extremely close. So I'm just happy to see 13 get placed where it deserves, in the garbage. And I'm happy to see 4 get some recognition and get the bump up.
Me too.
I guess I'll say I'm happy that 5 got the bump up. I'm really happy with that. I think it's right in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
That's probably the best I could have hoped for this, but I'm glad it's getting its spot in the fucking sun.
Yeah, it should be clear too. Like, between, again, 13th and 12th, I feel like are very low compared to the others from what we've discussed.
Yeah. Everything else is really close.
1 is a little bit down. 3 is still really good, but I feel like there is a gap between 3 and 12.
Yeah.
I feel like at 12 is where we were all like, these are like great games.
They're objectively good games.
Yeah.
At the very least, they're good games.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm good with the list.
All right. Well, we're through that. So I guess it's on to the bonus round. So the bonus round question is, what do we want out of Final Fantasy 16?
Yeah.
I start us off.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I think what I want, and we've kind of touched on it. So Jeremy, what you, and I think I agree, I like about Final Fantasy V is it's just an extremely polished consolidation game. That they kind of play it safe. They don't innovate as much. They take a break from massive innovations and they just make a good, solid classic game. And I would say something similar about Final Fantasy IX. It's a super polished Final Fantasy. It's a very classic style of Final Fantasy. They don't push the envelope really in any regard, but they just made a really good, solid game. And I think Final Fantasy has been trying, with all the last games, they've been making them kind of drastically different. And I think it's just time for them to kind of have a game where they return to sort of the foundation of what the series is, make a safer game, but make it super polished and make it right. And I think that will win back the faith of a lot of Final Fantasy fans like me, who've kind of had things shaken a bit especially with 13, but even a little bit with 12 and 15. So I think they really just have to go back to basics and just give us something safe. And then if they want to go off and start trying to innovate in good ways after that, then that's fair. But I think I think it's a good place to start. Just get themselves back on track.
Yeah, and Joe, honestly, you basically said what I was thinking. I want something that is like a Final Fantasy IX. I want back to the basics. Let's take our history of Final Fantasy. Let's put the best aspects of that into this game, and let's keep it simple. Let's not try to reinvent the wheel. Let's make a solid Final Fantasy game. And you don't need to reinvent everything. I just think we need a good classic Final Fantasy. It's been literally decades. What Final Fantasy IX came out 20 years ago.
Yeah.
20 years ago. And so 12, I guess you could argue is medieval setting, but it's not your typical kind of Final Fantasy. Like I would love a return to turn-based combat. I know that's not going to happen, but you never know. I would love a turn-based, we've seen it can work with a big budget RPG, JRPG. Persona 5 comes to mind. You can make a turn-based combat system that is fun. Like maybe have the combat system more like 10, perhaps something that is still really engaging but not so basic. Still leaves room for strategy. So yes, the setting, I would want a fantasy setting, medieval fantasy, high fantasy, whatever you want to call it. Battle system, something akin to 10, and a smaller cast. We don't need, I'd be fine if there was only 4 characters again, as in 15. That's fine. It can be open world even, honestly. Now that they have some experience with open world games. I don't think we're going to get 16 for a while. It all depends on Final Fantasy VII Remake, which we've really gone this whole podcast without mentioning, which is crazy. Yeah, I think similar to what Joe said. I just want return to the roots.
I don't know if we'll ever get that. I think
I don't think
if we ever get that, it's going to be games like Octopath. Like that's where we're going to see more classic RPG style on handhelds. What I expect is, assuming Final Fantasy VII Remake, which comes out in like a month, assuming it does well, that combat system, as I was discussing with you earlier, is a combination of action and turn-based, where the turn-based, if you hit X, it slows down time to a point where just things aren't, it's turn-based.
Yeah. You
can scroll through your menu, go between your characters to do different things. And then the action part of it is action. So instead of, if you compare relative to old Final Fantasy VII, when you hit attack, you're actually physically doing the inputs for the attack. You're moving around. You're still hitting X, but you're maneuvering. You're switching between stances to do things properly. Apparently, with different characters, there's different gameplay to switch up. So I feel like it is turn-based, but it's incorporating action elements into that. And I think they're going to take that system, do a couple tweaks, and that's what Final Fantasy 16 will be. I think it's going to be a closer return to turn-based than 15 or 13.
Yeah, that would be okay with me.
But I think
we're completely fine with that. Yeah,
I think that's what we're going to get, and hopefully it has an even bigger use of that. Like that's a big focus of it. But I feel like that will be the future, because I feel like they actually hit a nice sweet spot with this combat system. I really do. From just the demo, I'm really liking it.
And that's the thing. That's what I think Square Enix needs. If they find something that works, they need to stick with it more, not try to reinvent what Final Fantasy is every time, because it's really suffered in the last. Even though I love 12, 13, 15, like they're vastly different games.
Yeah,
and even 10 is really different when you compare that to the first 9.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they need to find something and stick with it. But then also, setting needs to be an ode to older games.
And I think it will be.
Yeah.
I think they'll go classic, like old fantasy type stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like Final Fantasy games are like, they're big budget games, but the fact that they constantly want to redo the combat system probably takes up a huge chunk of resources. So I think, it's going to be tough because it's going to be coming out on a new console. So they're probably going to want to use a new engine, which is going to take a lot of resources already. But I would rather them kind of stick with an older engine that they already know how to use, so that they can just put the resource resources into building assets in the game. Because to me, it's not even the combat. I don't really mind the action-based combat systems. And I like some of them a lot. Like I like 15's combat. It's my favorite combat. But to me, I just want them to actually build a world that feels full of life, and that is extremely explorable. Because to me, that's what the old Final Fantasies had, and that's what the newer ones kind of lack. Like 15, yes, it was open world, but it wasn't as full of life as I would have liked it, and it wasn't. I mean, obviously, it wasn't complete, but there just wasn't as much to go around and find. Like it felt a little bit barren. 13, we won't even mention that. 12, again, it wasn't as full of life to me, and there wasn't as many places, especially in towns, that you could explore. So if they could just build assets, make it so that yes, they have a few great, nice big towns, and you can actually go into like some of the buildings, like just for no reason, spend money on doing that kind of stuff. Use the old system. Don't spend a fortune trying to reinvent combat. And I think to me that I'd be happy with that.
I mean, I think you're saying what we've all been thinking, everyone's been thinking for decades now, is we want 7, 8, and 9's world map in the modern era. We want to be able to go in the world, be open, jump in an airship, fly to a town, go in that town, but like we want the old Final Fantasy.
It can be done
in modern.
Ni no Kuni. That world map is basically that. It can be done in a more modern JRPG.
And I'm willing to sacrifice the airship. Like I love it, but I can understand that, once you're in the air, you need a pretty huge world in order to for it to make sense to be chugging along in an airship, right? And so that at this point I could sacrifice, because I think the only way you could do that is to make something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Origins type size of world, but then it's hard to fill it. So I think you do almost with current technology and like more realistic proportions and scales and everything, it's tough to have like an explorable open world map that you can fly across. So I can sacrifice that.
You know what? We'll see soon, because if it's going to happen, it's going to have to happen with the 7 remake.
Yeah, and this episode should be going live couple days before FF7 remake comes out, I believe. So
I mean, I don't think we'll get that in part 1. That'll be part 2 in 2025.
And I don't think they're gonna have it.
You don't think so? I'm worried they won't either, Joe.
No.
But
I honestly don't expect it at this point. So I don't even know if I'd be disappointed, but yeah.
Well, we've talked about Final Fantasy for
3 hours.
Almost 3 hours. Congratulations, boys. We made it. We ranked Final Fantasy.
Wow. Is this our first ranking too?
Yeah. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be ranking other series, probably series that are, that have like multiple entries, like so we can really get in. Or maybe we should do series that are shorter where there's only 4 games, so we don't podcast for 2 hours, 3 hours. I don't know.
Yeah, I just saying that I have one we could do that me and you could do.
What's that?
Here.
Metal Gear?
Yeah.
I feel like we need one more person though. We need one more person there.
Did anybody?
We need Chris.
Did he play all of them?
He's a Metal Gear fiend.
Do you think he can jump down to Dartmouth and
I don't know.
We can get him on Skype or something.
Yeah, maybe we could.
Yeah.
Are we gonna do an outro?
We're gonna do an outro. We're getting to that.